Chapter 770. Boss is back. Did you get the things back? Looking at Jiang Hai and Edward Anderson who drove back, Tommy Charles and others who were still at the dock ran out. Because of the fishermen's trouble these days, Jiang Hai and the others didn't go fishing at night. Of course, before that, they made a lot of fishing, at least to ensure that the cooperative restaurants and Sam's Club in Prawalton had something to sell, but there was not so much variety. So, including Edward Anderson and the others, these people didn't go fishing at night. If they don't fish, there is no income. Although the salary is still as usual, what they really want is the bonus. Got it back, let's do it together. Hearing Tommy Charles's words, Jiang Hai also nodded. Hearing his words, Tommy Charles and the others ran over and looked at the high-pressure water cannons behind Jiang Hai's car. Their faces showed a grim look. The fisherman's character is not very good. These guys dare to provoke them, so they will certainly not let these guys have a good time. But after taking down these water cannons, they found that there were some steel plates under the water cannons, and they looked very thick, not even inferior to the ones used on the boat. These things are. Seeing these steel plates, Eleanor Cece asked with some doubts. He really didn't know. These are used for defense. Thanks to Edward Anderson's reminder, if we want a fire outside, the best way is to set up an armed turret outside. Hearing these people's words, Jiang Hai couldn't help but laugh, then looked at Edward Anderson and recalled the request he made when Jiang Hai was about to pay. Hey, that's better, come on, let's arm these two fishing boats. Looking at these steel plates, Bill Zaphonia, who had just arrived, laughed first, then shouted loudly. Hearing his words, everyone also shouted loudly. Then everyone went to the dock and took a blowtorch, saw blades, and a series of other things. They began to concentrate on transforming their boat. Jiang Hai was not very clear about this, but fortunately, these people were familiar with it. They knew how to increase their defense so that they wouldn't be hit by their opponents when they attacked. In addition, they didn't have to limit their vision. That night, the lights on the pier were only extinguished after 10 p.m. Jiang Hai dragged his tired body back home slowly. When he walked into the villa, he saw that the girls had specially saved dinner for him. He smiled. Although the girls hadn't said anything these days, Jiang Hai felt that they were still quite worried about him. However, some things couldn't be resolved just by taking a step back. At least, Jiang Hai didn't think so. After heating up the dishes, Jiang Hai ate a little and threw the remaining bowls and chopsticks into the dishwasher. Then he returned to his room. When he walked into his room, he found that Chi Jia, Chia, Shira, and Ashilia, who were in charge of taking care of him tonight, were already asleep on the bed. Jiang Hai tiptoed into the bathroom and took a simple shower. The weather outside was very hot today. Coupled with the sea breeze, the sun, and the heat from the blowtorch, Jiang Hai had sweated a lot. When the wind dried his sweat, Jiang Hai himself felt that there was a strange smell on his body. So he more or less had to take a shower. Jiang Hai turned on the tap and began to wash. However, when he was about to apply shampoo to his hair, he suddenly saw Chi Jia standing in front of the bathroom door. Hey! Why are you up? Did I wake you up? Looking at Chi Jia, who was standing there naked with a silk pajamas on her coat, Jiang Hai asked embarrassedly. No, I wasn't asleep. As soon as you came back, I heard your voice. Chi Jia shook her head and looked at Jiang Hai and said indifferently. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai also smiled helplessly. He quickly applied the shower gel and then took a shower. In fact, he really wanted to apologize to Chi Jia. It was indeed his fault for making her so worried. Chi Jia sighed and whispered to Jiang Hai, when men do things outside, women shouldn't talk too much. But you also know how important your position in this Zhuangxian is. So, I'll have to trouble you to consider the women around you before making any decisions. Hearing Jiang Hai stop talking, Chi Jia sighed and whispered to Jiang Hai. I really made you worry. Hearing this, Jiang Hai also felt warm in his heart. He quickly washed off the foam on his body and head. Jiang Hai wiped his hair and walked in front of Qi Jie. You know that you will make us worry, so you should pay more attention, okay? Looking at Jiang Hai, Qi Jie looked at him with some reproach. Then, she was about to turn around and leave, but the moment she turned around, Jiang Hai pulled her body back. Under her surprised gaze, Jiang Hai lowered his head and kissed her deeply on the lips. Feeling Jiang Hai's movements, Qi Jie almost instantly became soft. What she couldn't stand the most was Jiang Hai's overbearingness. Feeling the person in his arms instantly become as soft as a puddle of mud, Jiang Hai carried her out of the bathroom. But the remaining consciousness made Qi Jie press the bathroom door that Jiang Hai was about to open. Don't disturb them. Hearing Qi Jie's words, Jiang Hai froze for a moment, then nodded his head and launched an attack. In response to Jiang Hai's attack, Qi Jie snorted and began to fight back. War is so inexplicable, it's that simple. After an hour, the war ended. Jiang Hai also returned to the bed with Qi Jie, who had been washed again. After lying on the bed, Qi Jie turned around and went to sleep with Sheila beside her. She knew that Jiang Hai had the habit of hugging Qi to sleep, so she didn't care about it. Looking at Qi Jie's movements, Jiang Hai was somewhat embarrassed, but he was indeed used to hugging Qi, so he turned his head and hugged Qi to sleep. The night was silent. After waking up the next morning, Jiang Hai left again. Anyway, he had nothing to do. Naturally, he also had to help with the installation of the turrets. Although he was only going to be an assistant, after all, welding things also required skill and skill. In the United States, most of the owners of manors, ranches, and fish farms were very good at these things. This was because it was troublesome and expensive to ask for manual service in the United States. Instead of paying those people, they would rather do their own research. So from a young age, they spent their time repairing and maintaining things. When they grew up, they had accumulated enough experience. Although they couldn't be compared with those professionals, if they didn't care about the aesthetics and only cared about the quality, it was not a problem. Just like now, on the second night, several turrets had been welded. These turrets were square grids, and the size of the grids were different. Of course, the strength of the water guns was also different. Jiang Hai made his boat into a water hedgehog. Two 120mm cannons were placed at the bow, two 82mm cannons were placed on both sides of the boat, and the last two 65mm cannons were not welded, so they could be fired at any time. The 8 frames welded on the 2 boats could be said to be extremely sturdy. Although it was ugly and there were welded spots everywhere, it was quite sturdy. Jiang Hai and the others had done tests. Not to mention the 82mm cannons, even the 120mm cannons couldn't leave any marks on the iron plate. The only thing that could be done was that the boat would be knocked back and forth, that was all. In this regard, Jiang Hai was quite satisfied. There were a total of 4 openings for the 2 120mm water cannons. 3 of them were inlaid with bulletproof glass, which was used to observe the opposite side. There was a long oval water outlet about 30 centimeters long at the muzzle, which was used to investigate the angle. After testing, it could be fired to a position of about 45 degrees, which was enough. When the 2 water cannons opened at the same time, it would not give the other side any chance, and there were no blind spots. Jiang Hai had tried the power of the water cannons. Wooden boats were directly smashed into pieces, and sawdust flew everywhere. Ordinary small boats and small fishing boats would be overturned immediately. Only medium-sized fishing boats could withstand it, but they would also be shaken badly. It was like encountering a storm on the sea, which was quite terrifying. The 82mm cannons were like encountering a storm when dealing with ordinary small fishing boats. For such an effect, Jiang Hai was quite happy. Now, it was time to see if the other side would come. If they didn't come, Jiang Hai and the others would just treat it as a game. If they came, Jiang Hai would teach them how to behave. Jiang Hai had never been afraid of anyone when it came to playing rough. But would they not come? Don't joke. People die for money, and birds die for food. It was that simple. On the third day, after the water cannons were installed and adjusted, Jiang Hai and the others went to bed very early on the third night. Jiang Hai also did not fool around with his girlfriend. Sure enough, at 5:00 the next morning, when the sky was just beginning to darken, Edward Anderson sounded the alarm. Then, Jiang Hai and the fishermen rushed to the dock immediately. Belle also immediately went to the helipad and started the helicopter. The purpose of the helicopter was not to fight, but to film. Jiang Hai could be considered to have taken the initiative this time. If these guys were desperate, then don't blame Jiang Hai for not being polite. After the two fishing boats were full of people, they directly drove to the place where the alarm sounded. This time, their speed was very fast. When they arrived at the border, those people had not yet entered Jiang Hai's territory. Jiang Hai fixed his eyes and could not help but curse. Maybe it was because he saw Jiang Hai's fishing boats suffer from the water cannons 3 days ago, so 3 days later, nearly 2/3 of the fishing boats were equipped with water cannons. They were not even hiding them, they were directly placed on the deck. Through the binoculars, Jiang Hai could not help but sneer at those people's proud expressions. It could be seen that they did not come with good intentions, but Jiang Hai and the others did not come with good intentions either. At this time, many people on those boats also saw the cannons on Jiang Hai's boat. For a moment, many people felt a little guilty because they did not know what was in those cannons. Who cares what they are, just go straight to them. If Jiang Hai does not let us go, then drag his boat back to his dock. The boat of the Chamber of Commerce also saw Jiang Hai's cannons. The son of the Chamber of Commerce, who had a bad temper, said loudly to the people on the boat through the radio. Hearing that there was someone backing them, the hearts of these fishermen gradually relaxed. Jiang Hai, have you thought it through? Will you hand over the murderer or not? Seeing that the fishermen's minds gradually made up, the president of the Fishing Association couldn't help but chuckle, then shouted at Jiang Hai through the radio. I'll hand you over, I'm warning you now, you have entered my private waters. Now all of you withdraw immediately, and I will pretend that nothing happened. Otherwise, I will start to protect my rights and interests. Hearing the president's words, Jiang Hai directly scolded back, and then said loudly. Hearing that Jiang Hai still dared to be so tough, the president's face was quite ugly. It's really like the old saying of the Huaxia people, you won't cry until you see the coffin, you won't give up until you reach the Yellow River. Well, I'll see how you defend it, water cannon. Putting down the radio, he also knew that it was useless to say more, so he directly fired the cannons. With his order, countless water beams shot towards Jiang Hai's boat in an instant, but because they were still a little far away, these boats couldn't reach Jiang Hai's boat directly. But as the boats on both sides got closer and closer, it was only a matter of time before they reached it. 1682, 2365, and 1750. Looking at the thickness of these water beams, Edward Anderson reported the data to him. These guys still dare to use 82? That's really giving them face. Tell Marin to destroy the biggest boat, and we'll sweep the boats with 82 millimeters. Originally, Jiang Hai was thinking that he shouldn't be too ruthless in dealing with these ordinary boats. However, these people didn't think the same way. Now that these people wanted to kill Jiang Hai, how could Jiang Hai let them do as they pleased? With Jiang Hai's order, Edward Anderson immediately notified Marin Rupert. After Marin Rupert received the signal, he told Bill Havnia and Eleanor Cece on his boat, and the two immediately ran out of the cabin, came to the 120mm cannon, and aimed at the biggest boat on the opposite side. With Jiang Hai's order, the two also opened the valve in an instant. Boom! 2 water dragons rushed towards the big boat over there with an indomitable momentum. The crew on the deck of the boat was stunned at this time. What's going on? F***CK. Looking at the 2 water dragons rushing in front of him, the crew on the big boat over here couldn't help but be stunned. But before he finished speaking, the 2 water dragons had already rushed to his boat in an instant. Although the boat of the president of the Fisheries Association was not small, compared to Jiang Hai's boat, it was only one size smaller. But small was small. With a 120mm cannon rushing over, it would be strange if he wasn't stunned. And most importantly, his boat had no protective equipment. In an instant, the two water dragons rushed to the deck. The sailors over there didn't think that Jiang Hai's water dragons would rush up directly. The huge impact of the water jets rushed on these people, and the huge impact instantly washed them away. The impact force could directly break the wooden planks. Although it wasn't fatal in an instant, it was inevitable that they would be sent flying. The first unlucky one was the crew's son. He was directly sent flying backward and hit the wall over there. Fortunately, Marin Rupert didn't know who he was, so he didn't intend to kill him directly. After sending him flying, he began to charge at others. At the same time, he was also charging at the boat. In an instant, the boat was in a mess. The sailors on the deck were rolling and crawling in all directions. As for fighting back, they didn't even think about it. Of course, even if someone wanted to fight back, they would need to be able to touch Jiang Hai. The ship itself was no longer obedient, it was being washed by the current and was somewhat out of control. Seeing Jiang Hai firing and killing their leader in an instant, many fishermen were a little flustered. Especially those guys who just came here to fish. Their boat didn't have any water cannons and had no attack power. Now that they saw Jiang Hai's strength, they were also a little scared. Many boats slowed down their speed, ready to wait and see. But there were always some people who liked to take themselves too seriously. Seeing that the leading boat had lost its fighting power, some boats didn't retreat but rushed towards Jiang Hai, shouting slogans. Jiang Hai also walked out of the deck at this time and went to a 120mm cannon. Looking at these fishing boats rushing over, Jiang Hai couldn't help but grin. After Jiang Hai adjusted his position, he also roared and instantly opened the valve of the high-pressure water cannon. In an instant, a water dragon directly spewed out. The fishing boat that was still shouting slogans didn't have time to react at all. The water dragon had already rushed over. 120 against 82, what else was there to say? The water dragon instantly rushed straight to the deck of the boat. Not only did it instantly send the sailors flying, but it also sent them flying at least 3 meters away. It also sent the 82mm cannon into the sea. Jiang Hai knew that although the real expensive part of this game was the pump motor, the platform above it wasn't cheap either. It would cost at least $10,000. These guys fishing for a month might not even earn $10,000. Jiang Hai now made them feel the pain. Their 82mm cannon was instantly sent flying, their sailors were also instantly sent flying. And most importantly, the huge water dragon was constantly attacking the fishing boat. It must be known that this boat wasn't as big as the chairman's boat. It was just an ordinary small fishing boat near the sea. When the water dragon rushed forward, the boat was no longer moving to the side. Instead, it was moving backward. The water current was pushing it backward. The boat shook especially hard, as if it would flip over at any time. The people on the boat were completely panicked. Screams and curses were constantly heard. Seeing that these guys were almost scared out of their wits, Jiang Hai also turned the water cannon in another direction. After all, he didn't really want to send this boat of people into the sea to feed the sharks, so he was still very careful. Seeing that they were almost scared out of their wits, he directly changed direction. On the other side, the one who was controlling the water cannon was Endurkian Christian. This guy was even more cowardly. He rushed the 82mm cannon into the sea. After scattering the sailors, he changed his target. What should we do? What should we do now? Seeing that Jiang Hai had dealt with 3 ships in an instant, many fishing boats stopped in their tracks. They were a little scared. Although it was said that barefooted people were not afraid of wearing shoes, but for a pair of shoes, it was impossible for them to pay with their lives. Therefore, they were very conflicted and also very scared. I'll kill them all. These fishing boats didn't dare to move. On the other side, the chairman's fishing boat was also in a mess. The chairman's son looked like he was fished out of the water. After he climbed into the cabin, he took a long time to recover. The 120mm water cannon directly hit him. To be honest, the impact was really too big. At this time, there was an obvious bruise on his chest. It was estimated that he would be in pain for a while after he went back. When did he suffer such grievances? He immediately shouted loudly and directly picked up his shotgun. He was about to go out and fight with Jiang Hai, but before he could go out, he was stopped by his father. What I said to you, didn't you think about it? Did you forget that these people also have guns in their hands? Looking at his son in front of him, the chairman narrowed his eyes and said sternly to him. Hearing his father's words, the son was also a little confused. Then, what should we do now? Looking at his father, to be honest, he was quite unwilling. We have a lot of boats, I don't believe that he dares to directly overturn these boats. Tell the other boats to surround their boats. After thinking for a while, the chairman said loudly. Hearing the chairman's words, the captain immediately used the radio to tell the other fishing boats the news. After hearing this news, most of the people on the other fishing boats were very obedient and didn't move. After all, they were all old sailors. They knew that if the boat overturned, the people on the boat would die. Regardless of whether Jiang Hai will compensate them after they die, at least they will be the ones to die. The Americans especially value their lives. When the United States was at war, surrendering was actually not a difficult thing for them to accept. They were afraid of death on the surface, but now, their lives depended on whether Jiang Hai, a rich man, would have a conscience or not. They were very afraid, so most of the fishing boats were still in a wait-and-see attitude. However, not all fishing boats were in a wait-and-see attitude, at least some fishing boats were ready to come over. Wealth comes from danger, this was their way. Looking at the boats coming over, Jiang Hai and the others in the boat looked at each other, then they couldn't help but chuckle. Did these guys really think that they only had 2 water cannons? Shoot their water cannons into the sea, then let them come over. Mainly attack the big boat. Seeing the situation in front of them, Edward Anderson immediately ordered. After hearing his words, Jiang Hai and the others opened the water valve again and swept the water cannons towards the fishing boats. Unfortunately, their attacks were blocked by the steel plates. The threat to Jiang Hai and the others was almost zero. Only the splashed water fell from the holes in the roof, soaking them in water. But compared to Jiang Hai's water cannons, this water was far worse. One by one, the water cannons on the fishing boats were swept into the water by Jiang Hai and the others. One by one, the sailors fell into the sea or hid in the cabin. But these fishing boats were really tenacious. In such a situation, they still came over. They were prepared to use their advantage in numbers to squeeze Jiang Hai's fishing boats here, making them unable to move, forcing Jiang Hai and the others to negotiate or let them pass. But they were dreaming, but will things really go as they imagined? When these fishing boats rushed through the firepower blockade of Jiang Hai's 2 fishing boats, these people couldn't help but cheer. They knew that although Jiang Hai's fishing boats were protected, after all, the protection made the water cannons unable to move freely. There was a dead end. If there were a lot of boats, then it would be different, but in a situation where there weren't a lot of boats, this was very fatal. Although some fishing boats lost their water cannons, they still rushed to the side of Jiang Hai's boat. The president couldn't help but laugh. Let's see how you can stop us this time. Looking at Jiang Hai's 2 fishing boats in the distance, the president's eyes couldn't help but narrow. This time, he believed that Jiang Hai shouldn't be able to stop them. But will things really be as simple as he thought? Just as those fishing boats were about to reach Jiang Hai's fishing boat, Jiang Hai's mouth couldn't help but slightly open. These guys who don't have any water cannons want to deal with him? It can only be said that these guys are really too naive. With Jiang Hai's order, the 2 82mm water cannons on both sides also revealed their ferocious appearance. When these 2 water cannons were pushed out, the fishing boats were stunned. They completely didn't understand where these 2 water cannons came from, but it didn't prevent them from knowing that this time, they were in trouble. Fire. With Jiang Hai's order, the 2 water cannons on the side were also activated in an instant. The water dragon spewed out from the valve instantly hit the fishing boats. After all, the 82mm water cannons were not as scary as the 120mm water cannons. However, these fishing boats also had no way to resist the 82mm water cannon. Although it was not like the 120mm water cannon, which felt like it was going to capsize as soon as it rushed up, it was still directly pushed away, unlike the 120mm water cannon that dealt with the large fishing boat. What? There are water cannons. Looking at Jiang Hai's water cannons, the president couldn't help but be surprised. Originally, he thought that Jiang Hai's 2 120mm water cannons were already good enough, but he didn't expect that there were more, and they were comparable to his main cannon. Looking at these water cannons constantly pushing away the fishing boats, a trace of shock flashed in his heart. Then he had to smile bitterly. Although he didn't want to admit it, they were bound to lose to Jiang Hai in terms of money. I don't believe it, let's get on the boat and launch a sneak attack. Looking at his father who seemed to have aged 10 years in an instant, the president's son didn't think so. After secretly cursing, he was ready to use his own method to deal with Jiang Hai. Although they can't use guns, as long as they climb onto Jiang Hai's boat, then Jiang Hai's water cannons will be useless. Thinking of this, he also said to a few sailors who were on good terms with him. After listening to his words, these sailors immediately went to prepare the speedboats. Not long after, 2 speedboats came out from the back of the big boat, and then rushed toward Jiang Hai's boat. Looking at these 2 boats, Jiang Hai couldn't help but chuckle. Indeed, the speed of the speedboats is very fast and flexible. Not to mention 120mm water cannons, even 82mm water cannons will have a hard time hitting him. But Jiang Hai was already prepared for this. When the 2 speedboats came from the left and right of Jiang Hai's fishing boat, he was not in a hurry. Not only him, but Edward Anderson, Marin Rupert, and all the sailors were not in a hurry. It's up to you. Looking at Bauer Raman behind him, who was ready to continue, Marin Rupert said with a smile. Just watch the show. Hearing Marin Rupert's words, Bauer Raman also smiled evilly. At this time, the 2 speedboats were about to reach Jiang Hai's ship. They were only about 10 meters away. It would only take them a few seconds to reach Jiang Hai's ship. At this time, the president's son also stood up from his seat. Victory is in front of us, let's go. Pointing at Jiang Hai's 2 fishing boats in the distance, he also shouted loudly. Just as his voice fell, Carlyle Cotton and Bauer Raman, who were already prepared, also came out of their respective fishing boats, holding a small water valve in their hands. Looking at the water valve, the people on the 2 speedboats were stunned for a moment. Then, the people on both sides wanted to turn at the first moment, but unfortunately, their speed was not as fast as the speed of the water. As the 2 opened the water valve, 2 water dragons came out in an instant, giving the other party no chance at all. Before the president's son could react, he was hit in the chest again. He was thrown out of the speedboat and fell into the ocean. His chest was hit twice. He felt as if his chest was about to be torn apart. If it weren't for his strong will and his excellent swimming skills, he might have died in an instant. Enduring the dizziness, he floated to the surface of the water. What he saw was the people on the 2 boats being washed into the sea one by one, including the boat. It was swept far away in an instant. Then, it was hit by the 82mm projectile and crashed into a fishing boat. The fishing boat was hit by the 82mm projectile, and the speedboat, should be prepared for major repairs. Chapter 771. Aim at the boat over there and attack it with all your might. Jiang Hai looked at the fishing boats that had surrounded them. They had all retreated, including the 2 small boats that had capsized. Jiang Hai's gaze was fixed on the president's boat. As soon as Jiang Hai gave the order, 2 boats and 4 120mm water cannons locked onto the position of the president. Then, 4 water dragons flew out in an instant and crashed heavily into the side of the ship. The huge impact directly shook the ship left and right. Although it was very slight, the people on the ship were frightened. Everyone's face was pale as they grabbed everything they could grab on the ship. Their faces were filled with horror. Quick, run! This was especially true for the president. He wasn't young anymore. When he was hit, he was also frightened. He immediately shouted, not even caring about his son. As his voice fell, the people on the ship immediately moved. As soon as the boat turned, it sped in the direction of Boston. This time, Jiang Hai had no intention of letting it go. His goal was not to beat them back, but to let them know what pain was and who they could not afford to provoke. As soon as Jiang Hai said that, Edward Anderson and Marlon Rupert rushed over. Chase it! The speed of the boat was not as fast as Jiang Hai's boat. It was like a chase. The boat swayed left and right as if it was in a storm. Seeing Jiang Hai's ruthlessness, the other fishing boats followed suit and fled in all directions. Of course, there were still some people who were more particular. They rescued the president's son, who had fallen into the water, onto the boat. Taking advantage of Jiang Hai's lack of time to deal with them, they quickly sped back in the direction they had come from. Jiang Hai just smiled. He did not care about these small fries. What he cared about was the guy who had caused trouble. As they ran, Jiang Hai hit the big boat all the way. To be honest, if these people had not been out to sea all year round and had fought a real storm, they might not have been able to stand it. Even so, many people were already swallowing seasickness medicine. It was too swaying. Other than the swaying, nothing else was better. A lot of glass had been broken by Jiang Hai's water cannon. Some thin iron sheets had also been dented by Jiang Hai's water cannon. It was not an exaggeration to say that the entire ship was swaying in the wind and rain. When Jiang Hai looked at him like this, he felt quite relieved. On the ship, except for the captain, who was still desperately trying to control the ship, the rest of the people were grabbing onto whatever they could. It was too swaying. After more than 2 hours, their victory was in sight. Because there was a place in the distance that they and Jiang Hai were very familiar with. Michelson Green's Fishing Company. At this time, the people in the fishing company also saw Jiang Hai's 2 boats constantly attacking the boat. It really did not look like they were going to let it go. But if they wanted to capsize the boat, they would only attack one side. They should only be attacking one side, but now, they were attacking both sides. It was like they were playing with the boat. Jiang Hai's boat number 1 rushed over the boat, then stopped the water, and the other side rushed over. The boat was like a drunk man, swaying forward on the sea. Not to mention the people on the boat, even the people on the boat were about to vomit. But these people were very tenacious. They quickly ran towards the shipyard in front of them. Because they knew that as long as they stopped in the shipyard, they would be safe. Jiang Hai and Michelson had a good relationship, so they should not be attacked by him. Seeing this scene, Jiang Hai's attack seemed to be getting wilder and wilder. It was obvious that they wanted to stop him from entering the shipyard. However, these people were determined. They sped up, and their boats almost brushed against the metal poles of the pier as they entered the shipyard. Of course, the boats were completely damaged. But at this time, these people did not have the leisure to care about this. They were just sighing with emotion that they had survived a disaster. At this time, the president let go of his hand and sat down trembling. He did not want to experience this again in his life. "Boss, do you want to continue?" Looking at the broken boat rushing into the shipyard, Edward Anderson could not help but ask Jiang Hai. Jiang Hai was also thinking about this matter. Then, he shook his head. Michelson's background was not simple. If he caused trouble here today, although Jiang Hai was not afraid of him, there was no need to do so. Seeing Jiang Hai shake his head, the people on the shipyard also stopped the water. Then, Jiang Hai came to the bow with a loudspeaker. "Let me tell you, the Soaring Dragon Manor's fishing ground was sold to me by the government of Massachusetts. That's my territory. This is a small lesson for you. If I see you in my fishing ground again, I will sink you. Standing at the bow, Jiang Hai said loudly. Listening to Jiang Hai's words, the people in the shipyard heard Jiang Hai's toughness. Since Jiang Hai could chase them from Winthrop to Boston, it could be seen that his words were quite powerful. After saying that, Jiang Hai did not care whether these people heard him or not. He directly returned to the cabin. With an order, the people directly drove the boat in the direction of Jiang Hai's manor. On the way back, they saw a lot of boats passing by. These boats were the fishing boats that went to Jiang Hai's manor. But this time, they were not as arrogant as before. When these boats saw Jiang Hai's boat, they would subconsciously avoid it. They were afraid that Jiang Hai would accidentally think of them. What a joke! Today, they had seen Jiang Hai's toughness. It was estimated that they would not dare to provoke Jiang Hai again. At least, if they sailed over again, they would have to think twice. Unless they directly used weapons, they would not dare to come over. But if they directly used weapons, did you think that the coastal patrol was useless? They were indebted to Jiang Hai. The money they paid was Jiang Hai's. Usually, Jiang Hai would also give them a lot of money. Of course, it was a donation. The Winthrop police station was almost completely new now. A newly painted building, 3 times more police officers than before, and dozens of new police cars. These were all bought with Jiang Hai's taxes and donations. These people's food, accommodation, and daily necessities were all related to Jiang Hai. How could they not work for Jiang Hai? Although the coastal patrol was not like the Winthrop police, Jiang Hai was almost their biological father, and Jiang Hai was almost like their godfather. Last year, Jiang Hai donated $5 million to the coastal patrol to buy 20 helicopters. Of course, 20 helicopters actually cost less than $5 million. It was needless to say where the rest of the money went. Now that they had a conflict with Jiang Hai in the name of avenging their companions, perhaps the police would turn a blind eye to it. As long as they didn't kill anyone, they wouldn't care. But if they used guns, not to mention whether they could beat Jiang Hai or not, the coastal patrol would definitely not let them off easily. So in the current situation, it seemed that they really had no other choice. Force was definitely not enough. Soft? It was probably even more impossible. Jiang Hai was famous for not being moved by force or persuasion. His temper was as stubborn as a bull. This time, they really did not know what to do. Of course, it mainly depended on the president. However, Jiang Hai estimated that after today's incident, these guys would not dare to come again. Thinking of this, Jiang Hai's heart couldn't help but feel happy. Boss, after today, these guys probably won't dare to come again, but we still have to be careful because these guys are likely to put pressure on the state government. It will be very troublesome at that time. Seeing that Jiang Hai seemed to be in a good mood, Edward Anderson, who knew what these fishermen were like, also whispered to Jiang Hai. Okay, I got it. Hearing his words, Jiang Hai also expressed that he would remember it in his heart. In fact, even if Edward Anderson didn't say it, Jiang Hai also smiled. This time, these guys suffered such a big loss. It was impossible for them not to cry a few times. It is said that the crying child gets the milk. These fishermen were like ruffians when they acted shamelessly. But when they acted shamelessly, they were like naughty brats. Moreover, they were spoiled brats. Jiang Hai had long been guarding against them. In fact, this time, he dared to do so because of the state government's words. This was what Jiang Hai was least afraid of. As the 2 ships slowly moved towards the wharf, Jiang Hai and the others also discovered that unknowingly, it was already afternoon. This morning, they woke up very early, which meant that this sea battle had been going on for almost the entire morning. In fact, it was almost the same. The sea battle had been going on for more than an hour. After that, Jiang Hai chased after the president's ship for more than 2 hours. In total, it had been 3 hours, and there was still more than an hour to go. At this time, it was already past noon, and it was already afternoon. Jiang Hai and the others were in a state of mental collapse, so they didn't feel it. But now that they were relaxed, they felt a little tired, a little hot, and most importantly, hungry. Okay, let's speed up. I'll ask my family to prepare a delicious meal. Today is a great victory, we must celebrate. Looking at the people around him who were equally tired but in good spirits, Jiang Hai smiled and picked up the satellite phone to inform Qi Jia and the others at home that they were safe. Then, he told them to prepare a celebration feast. After hearing Jiang Hai's words, Qi Jia, Qia, and the others also moved together. Later, after thinking for a while, they told Jiang Hai that instead of just celebrating with the fishermen, it would be better to call Robbins Garcia and the others over at night, as well as Dulles Gerard and O'Connor Murphy. Everyone would have a good time together. After hearing their proposal, Jiang Hai was also full of praise. Then, on the way back, they deliberately set a net. Of course, this net was not used to catch ordinary small fish, but to catch big fish. They were all experts in this. After the net was set, a yellowfin tuna weighing more than 50 kilograms appeared in the net. In addition, there were some scattered American redfish and salmon. Jiang Hai picked 2 strong salmon and the tuna, and then threw the other fish back into the sea. These few fish were enough. After returning to the dock, they set some crab cages and shrimp cages. Logically speaking, these things would only be effective after a night. But Jiang Hai's place could not be judged according to common sense. For example, Jiang Hai stuffed some grass in it. After putting the cages in place, Jiang Hai and the others returned to Jiang Hai's villa. There was an empty space there, which was specially set aside by Jiang Hai for barbecue in the wild. After eating some steak and bread that Chia made during this period of time, Edward Anderson and the others packed up together. They threw the beer and wine into the huge freezer where Jiang Hai usually stored the meat. Then, they went to the forest behind and brought back some firewood. In the afternoon, Dulles Gerard and O'Connor Murphy came back first. They also brought back a few bottles of beer and wine. Of course, this wine was only for those who knew how to drink. It was mainly women who drank it. Otherwise, these few bottles would not be enough for the cowboys and fishermen. In the evening, after Robbins Garcia and the others drove the cattle into the cowshed, they killed a goat and brought it with them. The fire was also ready. Qi Jia and the others did not stay idle in the afternoon. They marinated a lot of steaks, beef, meatballs, sausages, and made a lot of salads. The meat was skewered with iron filaments. Whatever they wanted to eat, they could just take it and roast it. Philemon Turner's wife also brought a lot of snacks from home. For a while, the banquet was quite sumptuous. After 7:00 in the evening, the sun set and the bonfire lit up half of the sky. With Jiang Hai's order, the celebration party began. Tonight, at least for the first half of the night, it would be quite noisy. Fortunately, Jiang Hai had his own courtyard, so no one would hear or disturb him. Just as the banquet on his side was going well, everyone was eating meat and drinking wine. In a bar in Boston, it was very gloomy and depressed. Sitting in the most conspicuous position at the bar was a father and son. Although the father was now dry and refreshed, he still looked very embarrassed. He was holding a glass in his hand, but it was shaking all the time. The son was even more embarrassed at this time. His chest was wrapped with a bunch of bandages. When he raised his hand and breathed, he grimaced in pain. This time we lost. Picking up the glass and drinking half of it, the president said helplessly. Yes, President, this Jiang Hai is really not a human. He actually hit us with a water cannon and even hit us. This guy. Rich but heartless. He really should go to hell. Hearing the president's words, someone next to him said. No matter how these fishermen say that Jiang Hai is wrong, Jiang Hai is wrong, and Jiang Hai is not good. But the fact is the fact. They lost to Jiang Hai, lost to his manner. Now, even if they curse a hole in the sky, they can't do anything about it. At this time, the president's son was no longer clamoring. Because today, he almost died. He knew that Jiang Hai was not the kind of person who could be intimidated by threats. He knew that Jiang Hai would really kill people. This time, he was able to keep his life, but what about the next time? It is said that people will grow up after experiencing life and death. It seems that this son has really grown up at this time. This time, we lost, but we can't just admit it. We suffered a heavy loss this time. No matter what, we have to let Jiang Hai give us an explanation. Tomorrow, we will go to the Massachusetts state government and ask for an explanation. After drinking the wine in the glass, the president's eyes revealed a sense of helplessness and unwillingness. At the beginning, the government took the initiative to take over this matter, but they did not agree. Because they thought that a Hua Xia alone in a foreign land, they just wanted to find a reason to find fault with him. So what if he is a rich man? Just like a great man in Hua Xia, Jiang Hai's hometown, said, let him hide in the Sea of People's War. But who knew, this guy didn't play by the rules at all. He doesn't care about the people's support, he doesn't care about falling out with the people, and he doesn't care about maintaining his own face. Such a person, sigh, there is no way. Since that was the case, they might as well give in and see if they could get some money back. Otherwise, they wouldn't have any money to repair their boats. This time, almost everyone's boats were damaged in different ways. This didn't even include the 2 lives that were lost in it. Thinking of this, all the fishermen can't help but sigh. This is not the script they wanted before. No matter what these people think, Jiang Hai played until midnight, and he also drank a lot. After the people left, he went back to the room with the women. Needless to say, Jiang Hai didn't fall asleep until dawn. But don't think that he slept very late, in fact, he woke up very early. He got up at 10 o'clock. It wasn't because he wanted to go to the toilet, but because his phone kept ringing. Hey, wait a minute. Rubbing his hair, Jiang Hai glanced at the phone. The caller was none other than Moses Adams. After picking up, Jiang Hai glanced around. Except for Delina, Marion, Azalina, and Galina, the others were around him. They were all naked, and there were more or less some traces of last night. In order not to disturb them, Jiang Hai slowly got up, then walked to the first floor with a bath towel wrapped around him. He sat on the toilet on the first floor and picked up the phone. He was going to take a shower directly after the call. He has a problem. After waking up, it is easy to fall asleep again, so he was also ready to get up. At most, he will go to bed early tonight. Anyway, Jiang Hai stayed at home all day long, and he had nothing to do. Moses, what's the matter? Sitting on the toilet, Jiang Hai took a long breath and asked Moses Adams on the phone. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Moses Adams couldn't help but feel a little embarrassed. Indeed, disturbing the boss in the morning is really not something a subordinate should do, but he has 2 important things now, and he needs to talk to Jiang Hai about them. Boss, I'm really sorry to disturb your sleep, but now there are 2 things here. You have to give me instructions. Listening to Jiang Hai's voice, Moses Adams said to him over the phone. Go ahead. Hearing that he really has something to do, although Jiang Hai is a little angry, he will not vent it on his own people. The first thing is still those people from the Fisheries Association. Those people went to the Massachusetts government early this morning and sued you. Of course, they said a lot of crimes, such as murder, persecution of fishermen, land enclosure, and so on, but these things are not valid. The state government is not stupid, so the state government did not give any reason, but according to the state government, you asked for some money as a token of appreciation. Listening to Jiang Hai's words, Moses Adams also said to Jiang Hai. What do you mean by the politicians there? Although very reluctant, Jiang Hai knows that these guys are best at smoothing things over. Unlike him, these people need people's support, so they definitely can't push him to the opposite side of the people. Otherwise, they won't have anything to do with the next election. Although Jiang Hai didn't need to do anything, after all, he was still in Massachusetts. There were some things that he still had to do. So it was good to listen to what those people had to say. They mean that you should pay some money, $100,000. After thinking about it, Moses Adams said to Jiang Hai, "I'll give you a quota of 200,000. Let those guys never bother me in the future. Otherwise, I'll spend another 2 million to buy their lives." Jiang Hai is also sleepy now and said to Moses Adams. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Moses Adams also smiled. He knows that Jiang Hai is not joking, he is serious. There is a second thing. Google sent a letter. The fisherman's matter here is trivial. In Moses Adams' view, the most important thing is actually from Google. Google is recognized as the largest search engine in the world. Even if Google was cheated and forced to withdraw from Huaxia, Baidu also recognized this in the encyclopedia, so there is nothing to say. Everyone said that Google's failure to enter Huaxia was because of Baidu, but in fact, it was mainly related to Google. In addition to the search engine, Google also does a lot of things. One of them is called Google Maps. This map requires the use of satellites to scan the real world's location, etc. However, these things would never be approved by the Huaxia government. After all, if an American company were to know everything about Huaxia's territory, who would take responsibility if something were to happen? So, Google's failure to enter Huaxia can also be said to be caused by themselves. But Google is indeed Google. After their failure to enter Huaxia, they still made a lot of changes. When it comes to the IT industry, the biggest giant is naturally Microsoft, followed by Apple, which rose to become a supergiant in 10 years. Before that, Google had always been the third, but they did not follow the prescribed order. Many people might not know that Android, which is competing with Apple's ISO system, is actually developed by Google. Currently, in the world, other than ISO's Apple operating system and Microsoft's Win operating system, almost 90% of the mobile phones on the market were using Android operating system. In this regard, just the copyright tax alone was enough. As for the AI system, it was obvious that they were at the forefront of the world. In November 2015, Google's unmanned AI business manager revealed that they will launch drone delivery service in 2017. This proves that Microsoft, which specializes in PC, is no match for Google when it comes to AI. Of course, Google is also no match for Microsoft when it comes to PC hacking. After Steve Jobs passed away, Apple no longer has anyone who can compete with them, while Jiang Hai was fighting with the fishermen yesterday, in Mountain View, California, Santa Clara County, California. In the city's most famous landmark, the Google building, the 43-year-old co-founder of Google, Larry Page, walked into his office and threw his clothes on the sofa. His secretary picked up the clothes and hung them neatly on the hanger. However, Larry Page acted as if he didn't see it. He lowered his head and walked quickly to his desk. There is a stack of papers on his desk. It is about a technology, no, it is a game's progress option. Larry Page frowned as he looked at the stack of reports. To be honest, he hated the words written on them. Larry, the new director, sent a letter. While Larry Page was deep in thought, a man with a white beard walked in. If anyone from Google is around, they will recognize this man. He is Larry Page's good friend and one of the founders of Google, Sergey Brin. The two of them were in the same year and were good friends from the same school. Although one is American and the other is Russian, they are very close. The new director? Oh, the director who owns 1.2% of the shares. After hearing Sergey's words, Larry Page looked away from the stack of reports and asked Sergey with a puzzled look on his face. That's him. But this guy is really mysterious. I only know that his name is Hai Jiang. Oh, according to the language of his homeland, he should be called Jiang Hai. He's a Chinese and lives in Winthrop. Hearing Larry Page's words, Sergey sat across from him and looked at him with a smile. Did the director say when he would come over to claim the shares? Larry Page asked casually when he heard Sergey's words. It's only 2% of the shares. To be honest, they don't care about it. After all, the two of them relied on this to make a fortune. Each of them now has a net worth of more than 20 billion. They really don't care about 2% of the shares, but this is still a force that needs to be united. No, it seems that this person is not in a hurry at all, but he has already made his position clear. He has no interest in the shares. He handed over the voting rights of these shares to us. He just wants dividends. According to his lawyer, maybe he will come to take a look in the winter. Sergei shrugged and was quite curious about Jiang Hai. This guy is really interesting. He was a little surprised when he heard Sergei's words from Moses Adams. He remembered that the last time, the person who owned these shares was a very annoying guy. That guy really thought that he could do something with his shares, so he was very arrogant. Of course, after being hit by reality, this person became honest. And now, the new owner of the shares seems to be more interesting than that guy, still having a headache about this direction? When Larry Page looked up, Sergei glanced at the document in front of him. In fact, he also has a copy of this document in his room, but he was too lazy to think about it. Those old people have always thought that virtual reality, VR, is the future development direction. Just like in some online novels, people can wear a helmet and enter a virtual world. But what I want to say is that this kind of technology is not desirable. Earth is our Earth, this world is our world. We don't want to change this world, but we want to think about how to escape from this world. This approach is really naive. So I want to prove to them that increasing AR is our future. Larry Page muttered as he looked at the report in his hand. That's up to you, I'll listen to you completely. However, it was obvious that Sergey Brin wouldn't go against him. He might not be convinced by anyone in terms of technology, but he was convinced by Larry Page. After all, everything he had was given to him by Larry Page. By the way, I remember that our new director is quite young. Since he supports me, let him try out our new product. Larry Page couldn't help but smile. Then, he seemed to have remembered something, and he spoke to Sergey Brin. After he spoke, Google sent an email that afternoon. And this email, at this time, was lying in Jiang Hai's phone. What the hell is this? Jiang Hai looked at the new software installed in the email on his phone. He opened it with some confusion. Jiang Hai also verified his Google account. Then, after a start, he entered the game. However, in the game, 3 little guys appeared next to his character. As a child, Jiang Hai still recognized these 3 little guys. They were Little Fire Dragon, Wonderful Frog, and Jenny Turtle. Is this Pokemon? Jiang Hai looked at the image in front of him. He hesitated and clicked on Little Fire Dragon. In an instant, the image flashed and his phone's camera was turned on. On the tile floor opposite him, a red-balled little animal was looking at him with a pair of cute big eyes. Chapter 772. Pokémon Go was a mobile RPG game developed by Nintendo, the Pokémon Company, and Google. It was an augmented reality pet training RPG game. In China, it was also known as Pokémon. As for why it was called that, those who had played Emerald Leaf and Emerald Gem would know very well. Jiang Hai hated Japan. He hated the culture, the customs, the politics, and the people there. But there were also a few things that he ignored. People were like this. For some things they liked, they would always ignore where it came from. For example, some teachers who are good at both their skills and morals. Although Jiang Hai has a lot of women, it is understandable for him to watch porn occasionally. He also likes some anime. He likes Naruto and Shinigami, but he likes One Piece. He also likes Dragon Ball, Saint Seiya, Slam Dunk, etc. He also likes the popular One Punch Man. As for games, there are not many people who have not played Japanese games before. For example, the famous Live Football, Silent Hill, Capcom's Lock, Resident Evil, Street Fighter, Dinosaur Crisis, Monster Hunter, Devil May Cry, Sega's Total War, House of Death, Sonic, etc. Although Huaxia people hate Japan, almost all Huaxia people will be familiar with Japanese things. That's why when you go to a bar to drink Rio at night, Rio is from Japan. Some university students, like Jiang Hai in the past, eat instant noodles. Master Kang's main shares are also from Japan. This includes all the online shopping platforms and communication platforms used in China. When Jiang Hai started his business, he had received venture capital from Japan. Jiang Hai is not sure if there are any online shopping platforms now, but he thinks there should be some. After all, those platforms are very profitable. Secondly, even if Feng Yu does not want to admit it, Japan has the highest number of cars in China. That's why Huaxia people are in a dilemma. They want to boycott Japanese products, but most of them cannot live without these things. Jiang Hai used to be an angry young man in the past. But now, he is much calmer, even though he still hates Japan. But when it comes to some Japanese products, he will still use them. Of course, if there is a substitute, he will use it. For example, European products or US products. But what's the difference between US products and Japanese products? In any case, in the eyes of some people in China, Japan was evil. As the opposite of China, America was naturally evil, and Europe was naturally evil as well. The only countries that were not evil were probably countries like Pakistan and the like. Of course, the above was just a joke. But now, Jiang Hai is playing this game. He is addicted to it. On July 7th, this game will be released in Oceania, which is Australia and New Zealand. Once the game is released, it becomes popular all over the world. All the websites and dating platforms are talking about this game. At first, Jiang Hai didn't pay much attention to it. After all, he didn't leave the house. But since Google sent him the game, he found that he was addicted to playing games like he was in junior high school. For the children in China, there were very few people who didn't know about the Pokemon brand. Of course, everyone knew that it was mainly because of an animated film. But this animated film was actually for the sake of gaming. Just like the Digimon anime, the Pet Sprite was a game first before the anime. Jiang Hai had played this game before. But his family's financial condition does not allow him to buy GB or GBA games when he was in school. That's why he had only borrowed his classmate's game console to play. When he grew up and got a computer, he had also downloaded the game's emulator on his computer. That's why he is quite familiar with this game. But this game is different from the previous games. This game is not to be played at home. Instead, it is to be played outside. After all, this game is connected to Google Maps. After walking outside, you can use the Pokeball to capture Pokemon. From there, you can gain experience and an item called the Lollipop. This item is specially made for the Pokemon to level up and evolve. It is not like the previous games where you have to beat the Pokemon half to death before you can capture it. This is purely based on luck. The war between the players is mainly near the dojos. Joining a different faction and becoming the dojo master is not a bad choice. Other than that, there are many supply points on the game map. Once you enter the supply points, you can get Pokeballs and other items. It is not bad. Jiang Hai is playing here. Naturally, he asked his friends in China to play as well. However, most of the places in China are already in the trivia area. Maybe it is because the country does not allow Google to enter. But there are some places that are not in the trivia area. For example, the 3 provinces in the northeast and part of Meng province. But these places are not like overseas. According to Jiang Hai's good friend Su Wei, there are Pokemon in the city, but there are only dojos and supply points in the city center. Outside the city, there are no Pokemon. It is a complete blank. No one knows when the local area will be opened. But this has nothing to do with Jiang Hai. Because at this time, he is having a good time in the United States. Every morning when he wakes up, he takes his phone and walks around his manor. The usually lazy Jiang Hai has disappeared. This surprised Qi Jia and the others, but after seeing him play this game, they also played it out of curiosity. After that, Jiang Hai is not the only one who is addicted. Every day, they will walk around the manor. And most importantly, Jiang Hai's luck is not bad. The most important thing about this game is that it is realistic. Only places with water will have water-type Pokemon. Only places with mountains will have Earth-type Pokemon. So, Jiang Hai's manor has everything. There is grass, forest, and sea. Although there are no dojos or supply points in this area, there is quite a variety of Pokemon. In addition, Jiang Hai is Google's client. In order to let Jiang Hai better experience this game, Google specially gave Jiang Hai a pet egg. A pet egg that will definitely hatch a mini dragon. This is considered a benefit. These days, Jiang Hai has caught a lot of Pokemon in his manor. Among them, his main pet is Charmander. It is still Charmander, and it is still Charmander. There is no spawning ground for Charmander on his side. Perhaps because it is closer to the sea, he has spawned a lot of Yoni turtles. The Yoni turtles he caught later evolved into Kami turtles, and then evolved into water arrow turtles. He has collected enough lollipops. In addition, he has Ibu, Kata duck, big tongue shell, supersonic bat, BB bird, Lada, Thorlip, Kathy, green caterpillar, unicorn bug, and so on. Of course, those weaker Pokemon are not his cup of tea. He is mainly catching these few Pokemon. The first is the water arrow turtle. The second is the supersonic bat, which he has already turned into a big mouth bat. The third is Ibu. Ibu needs 25 lollipops to evolve, but the direction of evolution is not fixed, so Jiang Hai feels uncertain. It evolves randomly. For now, what Jiang Hai wants the most is the lightning-type Pokemon. Because he does not have a lightning-type pet like Pikachu, he only caught a few small magnetic monsters. This game is really not good. BB Bird has already evolved into BB Eagle. Although its potential is not good, it is good that this kind of Pokemon is easy to catch. Currently, he is mainly cultivating these 4 types of Pokemon. As for the others, he is preparing to cultivate his main core, Mini Dragon and Charmander. However, he does not have the spawn points for these 2 types of Pokemon, which is very depressing. But although he is depressing, Jiang Hai is still very happy. Early this morning, after he had breakfast, he took the biggest power bank he bought and left. Little Huang and Xiao Bai looked at Jiang Hai and followed him. After Jiang Hai left, Qi Jia and the others also left the villa and walked around with their phones. They are not as bored as Jiang Hai, but anyway, there is nothing to do. It is always good to walk around. But just as Jiang Hai was walking around, his cell phone suddenly rang. He helplessly watched the game page disappear. Jiang Hai also sighed and glanced at the caller. It made Jiang Hai a little surprised because he did not know this number. Hello? Who is this? Although he was curious whether this is an insurance seller, Jiang Hai still picked up and asked with some doubts. Is this Jiang Hai? Hearing Jiang Hai's voice over the phone, a woman's voice with some uncertainty came from the other side of the phone. It's me, you are. Hearing the woman's voice over the phone, Jiang Hai was a little puzzled. This voice is a bit familiar, but not too familiar. Jiang Hai carefully went through it in his mind. He really doesn't seem to know the owner of this voice. It's me, Xia Yuan. After hearing that it was Jiang Hai, Xia Yuan hesitated for a moment and said to Jiang Hai. Xia Yuan? Oh, hello, you haven't contacted me for so long, I thought, hee. Is there something you need from me? After hearing Xia Yuan's name, a picture flashed in Jiang Hai's mind. It was the young woman he met before entering the mountain. He called her, but she never called Jiang Hai. Jiang Hai thought that she just wanted to spend the night with him, so he didn't take the initiative to contact her. It's like this. A group of hooligans came to the shop where I work. One of them should be an Indian girl. She kept saying that she was looking for Winthrop's Jiang Hai, and those people said that they knew Jiang Hai and could take her to Jiang Hai. I was worried that this girl was talking about you, so I called to ask you." Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Xia Yuan on the other side of the phone couldn't help but blush. She was naturally very clear about the story between her and Jiang Hai. In fact, these days, sometimes she also thought about Jiang Hai. However, she knew that she and Jiang Hai were not people of the same world, so it was better not to contact him. This was better for herself and Jiang Hai. However, after what happened today, she still called Jiang Hai Indian girl? Is her name Tarak? Hearing Xia Yuan's words, Jiang Hai's first impression was of the little girl who was sleeping on the bed and looking at him when he was in the Tuajia tribe. Shouldn't she be in the mountains? Why did she appear? I don't know, but it seems that she just came out of the mountains. Those who deceived her are not good people. If you know them, then you have to think of a way. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Xia Yuan said very seriously. As mentioned before, Xia Yuan's town is also next to the Alabama mountain range. It's a lawless area, very chaotic, but the public security is good. But even if it's good, chaos means that there are many bad people. Xia Yuan is a local snake. If she said that those people are not good people, then those people are probably not good people. Jiang Hai's brain also turned for a moment. If it's really Tarak, why did she come out of the mountains? Why didn't she call him after coming out? But no matter how many doubts he has now, since he knows that an Indian girl like Tarak was deceived by a group of hooligans, Jiang Hai can't just ignore everything. Then you wait for me, I'll go there now. After speaking to Xia Yuan on the other side of the phone, Jiang Hai put away his phone and quickly ran back to the front of his villa. He just happened to see Jialina, who was practicing her kicks in the middle of the building. Jialina, come with me, bring the weapons. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Jialina was a little curious, but she still packed up and quickly returned to her room to take a shower, then put on a slim-fit clothes and left Jiang Hai's villa with 2 pistols. Jiang Hai also went upstairs to change his clothes and came down. Although he has been back for a long time, the shield has not been repaired. This time they can only drive the Tesla. When they went, he specifically called Qi Jia and told them that he had something to do, and he didn't know if he would come back at night. There is no need to worry about safety, after all, Jialina will help to look after him. After the phone call, the two also got in the car and rushed straight to the town where Xia Yuan was. At this time, in a dilapidated room in the town where Xia Yuan was located, there were 4 hooligans, gathered there to play cards, and in the distance, there was a girl whose hands and feet were tied, and her mouth was covered with a piece of tape. If Jiang Hai was here, he would definitely recognize that this girl was none other than Tarak, who he had met once before, but at this time, her face was full of panic, and a pair of big eyes were also looking at the people in front of her in horror. Looking at her appearance, the 4 men chuckled, then turned their heads and continued to play cards. I don't want to play, my luck is really bad today. Throwing the cards in his hand on the table, a white man leaned on his chair with an unhappy face, then took out a cigarette and lit it up, looking at the people in front of him with an unhappy face. Your luck is really bad today. Hearing this man's words, a person next to him couldn't help but laugh, then he grabbed the green dollars in front of him, then sorted them out one by one and put them in his pocket. Damn, you are really King lucky. By the way, boss, this girl's figure and appearance are quite good, do you want us to try her first? Looking at the evil face of his companion, this guy couldn't help but curse, then he looked up and saw Tarak tied there, licked his lips, and said with a smile. Try your ass, this guy is looking for Jiang Hai. Jiang Hai and Chelsea's boss Edith have a grudge. This woman is the person he wants. Besides, such a good thing, you want to do it? You know, her first time or not, the price is far different. Glancing at him faintly, the man opposite him said disdainfully. TSK, I haven't felt such a good quality woman, it's a pity not to let her come. Listening to the boss's words, the white man clicked his tongue twice, but his eyes were staring at Tarak. He won't give up so easily. It was really an accident that they met Tarak. Tarak came out of the mountain today. After she first asked for the location, she was going to go to Winthrop to find Jiang Hai, but she didn't expect that the person she asked didn't know where Winthrop was. That person was also an old Chinese man. He didn't understand English, so he didn't know what she was talking about. After hearing her words, the four guys here told her that they knew Jiang Hai and could take her to Winthrop. Then, the four of them took her to a nearby supermarket to buy some things. Xia Yuan, who has been working hard to learn English recently, accidentally heard their conversation. After remembering who the four people were, she called Jiang Hai. But unfortunately, after the four people took Tarak back to their room, they tied her up, then called Edith and told him about it. The names of Jiang Hai and Edith are actually very famous in the whole Boston area. Of course, Edith's name is much more famous than Jiang Hai's. Jiang Hai's name is nothing more than a rich man from Huaxia who has a good relationship with the government. The only thing that is famous is his fight with the fishermen a few days ago. In their view, the one who finally admitted defeat was Jiang Hai. Otherwise, why would he pay? That's $200,000. It's enough to keep 2 fishing boats busy for a year. In their view, Jiang Hai is a person who only knows how to spend money to settle things. In fact, in the eyes of those hoodlums, they really look down on Jiang Hai. After all, Jiang Hai's deeds are not known to others. But Edith is different. This guy has been the underground emperor of the Boston area for a long time. He opened a casino and enjoyed both gray and white. If they had to choose between Jiang Hai and Edith, they would definitely choose Edith. But they are wrong about one thing. Edith doesn't dare to provoke Jiang Hai, but they don't know this. And most importantly, the call they made was not to Kristen Edith, but to his son, Izzo Edith. Izzo Edith doesn't have as good a foresight as his father. His father knows that Jiang Hai can't be provoked, but he doesn't know. He only knows that his family has fallen many times because of Jiang Hai. Jiang Hai doesn't give them any face. Even a while ago, in order to avoid Jiang Hai, they closed the casino. If the casino was closed, not only would they lose their main source of income, but most importantly, they would lose their venue. For the past few days, Izzo Edith had been very uncomfortable. He did not understand why his father was afraid of a cow cellar. After receiving the phone call today, he had some ideas in his heart, but he still needed to plan how to do it. However, he told those people to keep an eye on Tarak. Since it was related to Jiang Hai, then he had to make sure that it worked well. Then he went to find a few of his friends, ready to find a way to trick Jiang Hai from this girl. Now they are thinking about whether to kidnap the girl directly, and then call Jiang Hai to come to them. Then they can blackmail Jiang Hai, or directly kill Jiang Hai to save his father and family some trouble here. Thinking of this, they feel that it is better to do it once and for all because they are not short of money. But they don't know that while these people are planning there, Jiang Hai and Jia Lina have already driven to the town where Xia Yuan is. According to her, after Jiang Hai parked the car in front of the Xishang supermarket, Xia Yuan also ran out. When she saw Jiang Hai, she clearly smiled, but when she saw Jia Lina, her face froze for a moment. Then she nodded to Jia Lina unwillingly, but Jia Lina, who was chewing gum at this time, ignored her. She still sat there, chewing gum and listening to music. Looking at her, Xia Yuan shrugged and sat in the car. "This is, your girlfriend? So fierce," Xia Yuan said in a low voice as she gently poked Jiang Hai. Kind of." Hearing Xia Yuan's words, Jiang Hai was stunned for a moment, then he found that Jia Lina's body also trembled. He knew that she heard Xia Yuan's words, so he said with a smile. If she is really Jiang Hai's girlfriend, then she will have to find trouble with Jiang Hai. But the problem was that she wasn't. She was just Jiang Hai's servant and bodyguard. Now that Jiang Hai said that she was one, it made her heart feel warm. However, she didn't show it on her face. She just sat there and chewed her gum. "What's going on?" Starting the engine, Jiang Hai asked Xia Yuan while driving in the direction she pointed. This town is actually not big. Xia Yuan is really familiar with the neighborhood, plus there is a white girl in her supermarket who lives near these people, so she naturally knows the situation here. And just as Jiang Hai was searching for these people, Izoatus over there had also made up his mind. If he wants to do it, he will do it big. No one will go against them for a dead person. He had already inquired about it. Jiang Hai didn't have any immediate relatives. His only wife was still in the country. If something happened, he would just have to run away for a while. He believed that in the land of Boston, their family was still the overlord. He has to admit that sometimes young people do things in one word, fierce, and sometimes their thinking is too simple. What does it mean that no one will avenge Jiang Hai? Whether Jiang Hai is there or not, his manner is there, his women are there, even if it is for the sake of face, they will not go against the Atis family. Moreover, does he really think that he can beat Jiang Hai? She was really naive to the extreme. But in any case, these young people in the United States only have one word, charge. Since he made the decision, Izoatus found a few of his friends and prepared to give Jiang Hai a special meeting. After learning of Izo's decision, while Jiang Hai was looking for these people, the 4 people who kidnapped Tarak also received a call from Izo. Izo said on the phone that as long as the matter is done, these 4 people will become the managers of their family's casino. Also, each of them would be paid $50,000. These people were very excited about the money and the fact that their jobs would be solved, so they agreed on the spot. Then these people were afraid that Izoatus couldn't find the location, so the boss deliberately took 2 people to pick them up. And the guy who had evil intentions at the beginning stayed in the room to watch Tarak, in case of any accidents. After hearing that these people left, the man couldn't help but stand up from the chair with an evil smile on his face, then walked in front of Tarak, squatted down, and looked at Tarak's face. He couldn't help but laugh. Such a beautiful face, such a good figure, if I can't do it, it would be a waste. Hee, the boss said that I can't do it directly, then you have to take the initiative. If you don't want to suffer, use your little mouth to relieve me. Grabbing Tarak's hair, the white man's eyes were full of flames of desire. His nose gently sniffed Tarak's neck, and his mouth was full of obscene words. Hearing his words, Tarak immediately struggled. What a joke, she didn't want anything to happen between her and this guy. But looking at Tarak's struggle, the man became more excited. His hands forcibly fixed Tarak's head, then he was about to kiss her. But at this moment, there was a sudden knock on the door. Hearing the knock on the door, the man couldn't help but froze for a moment, but he didn't care. He continued to prepare for violence, but the knocking didn't stop until he was a little annoyed, then he let go of his hand. Who is it? The guy shouted at the door. It could be heard that he had a bad temper. It's me, did anyone call for service here? Because when they came here, they already heard from Xia Yuan that these 4 guys are not good people. In order to trick the door open, Jiang Hai and Jia Lina deliberately made this plan. Now the one who spoke is Jia Lina. Xia Yuan is still in the car, and Jiang Hai won't let her take the risk. Service? Hearing the man's words, the man couldn't help murmuring out of curiosity, could it be that his boss was afraid that I couldn't control my primitive strength when I looked at people here? Therefore, he specially called one for me before leaving? Thinking of this possibility, the man couldn't help but laugh. If someone can help him vent, he doesn't mind letting this little girl go. Thinking of this, he couldn't help but stand up and walk to the door. Looking through the peephole in the door, he saw Jia Lina's cold and handsome face, as well as her perfect figure. Maybe she felt his footsteps. Jia Lina deliberately smiled at him. Looking at the mature Jia Lina, the man's desire was instantly awakened by Tarak. He really hasn't seen anyone as beautiful as Jia Lina in this line of work. After all, he's not a habitual criminal, nor is he professionally trained. This guy doesn't know that he should be careful and vigilant at this time. He just felt that his lower part seemed to be harder, so without saying anything, he directly opened the door. But the moment the door opened, a gun was pointed at his head. Jiang Hai and Jia Lina slowly walked into the room. When Jiang Hai saw Tarak tied up there, his eyes narrowed. "Brother, if you have something to say, we're from Edith. You know Edith, we're definitely the local tyrant here. If you offend us, you won't be able to survive in Boston." Raising his hands high, this guy calmed down in an instant. Seeing the anger in Jiang Hai's eyes, he didn't know who Jiang Hai is, and he hasn't seen Jiang Hai before. However, he knew that this person was most likely here to save the girl. It was useless to beg for mercy now, so he could only threaten. The easiest way to use the tiger's skin as a flag was to find a local bully to protect him. Adis was obviously a good choice. "Oh. There's something about Edith in this?" Hearing his words, Jiang Hai couldn't help but chuckle. He really didn't expect that there would be something about Kristen Edith here, ever since he was surrounded in the casino that time. Jiang Hai has already begun to prepare to deal with these three guys. Although Kristen Edith made his stance clear at the scene, Jiang Hai wasn't ready to let him go. But this guy is smart enough. After Jiang Hai left, his casino closed in the afternoon, and then he disappeared. Jiang Hai couldn't find any trouble with him, so he prepared to deal with the three guys first, then deal with him. But he didn't expect that he would be inexplicably involved today. It seems that this matter is getting more and more interesting. Bang! Thinking of this, Jiang Hai didn't say anything and directly shot the man in the leg. The .50 caliber Desert Eagle almost blew up the man's thigh. The man covered his leg and kept screaming. That scream was even louder than the sound of a pig being slaughtered, but Jiang Hai didn't care. In order not to let him continue to stimulate his eardrums, Jiang Hai went up and kicked him until he fainted, then walked towards Tarak. Chapter 773. Woo, you scared me to death. I thought I would never see you again. After Jiang Hai slowly tore off the rope and the tape on Tarak's mouth, Tarak couldn't help but hug Jiang Hai's neck and cry loudly. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai couldn't help but sigh. After all, this girl is still inexperienced. Okay, I'm here to save you, but why didn't you call me when you came out? I remember that there is a satellite phone in the tribe. Looking at Tarak in front of him, Jiang Hai patted her back gently. After the girl's mood gradually calmed down, Jiang Hai couldn't help but look at her and asked with some doubts. Yes, it's because the patriarch asked me to give this to you. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, the girl took out a letter from her back. Fortunately, she hid this letter very well and didn't take it out, so these people didn't know about it. Okay, I got it. Jiang Hai nodded after hearing her words. Since the old patriarch asked her to come, there must be some secrets in it, but Jiang Hai can't say it at this time. He just took the letter and stuffed it into his pocket. In Boston, no one dares to steal his things. Jiang Hai, a group of people is coming. Just as Jiang Hai put away the letter, his cell phone suddenly rang. When he picked it up, it was Xia Yuan's voice. Hearing her voice, Jiang Hai also gave Jia Lina a look. Jia Lina came to the window in a few steps, glanced at it, and gestured a few times to Jiang Hai. There are a total of 2 cars and 3 motorcycles. On the 3 motorcycles, they should be with this guy. There are also 2 cars. They shouldn't be the people behind these people. Hee, this time we can catch them all in one fell swoop. Squinting his eyes, Jiang Hai immediately said to Xia Yuan. Because Jiang Hai's car was originally parked some distance away from this community, Jiang Hai asked Xia Yuan to lock the car and hide well. They shouldn't notice her. Jiang Hai immediately hid Tarlac under the bed. Under Jiang Hai's signal, Jia Lina easily hid behind the refrigerator. Jiang Hai took out his Google Glass, put it on his eyes, and turned on the video. Just like that, he sat on the table and waited for the arrival of these people. His hand was still fiddling with the big eagle in his hand. After everything was ready, not long after, the 3 motorcycles and 2 cars stopped in front of the door. Looking at the door that was opened, the faces of the 3 people on the side changed at the same time. The 8 people who got out of the car after dinner also looked at each other. It was obvious that something had happened. Let's go in and see. Seeing this scene, Izoatus couldn't help but take out a Beretta 92F from his back. Looking at his action, the others also took out their guns. But after all, they are just some gangsters. The only thing they can get are pistols. 11 people, 11 guns, slowly walked into the room. The 3 people who came in first turned the corner and saw their companion lying on the ground, and Jiang Hai sitting at the table. Seeing this scene, they didn't need to say anything. They directly raised their guns to shoot, but Jiang Hai was faster. Bang! 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 With 3 consecutive sounds, the arms of the 3 people holding the guns were shot in an instant. The pistols fell directly in the distance, and they squatted down while covering their hands, screaming constantly. Seeing this scene, Izo and the others also wanted to shoot directly, but they saw that Jiang Hai had already raised his gun. Looking at Jiang Hai's understatement, Izo waved his hand and asked everyone to stop first. Wait a minute, Jiang Hai, I am Izoatus, my father is Kristen Atus, I think we may have some misunderstanding. Looking at Jiang Hai's raised hand, the man swallowed a mouthful of saliva and said. He didn't think that Jiang Hai, who looked very weak, would be so ruthless. Moreover, his marksmanship was quite accurate. He watched as the 3 men's hands were blown up. And the most important thing is that he doesn't know the situation in this room. Is there only Jiang Hai, or they have been surrounded, so now, it's actually a good choice to admit defeat. Kristen is getting bolder and bolder. He even dared to kidnap my people. You are really arrogant. Hearing his words, Jiang Hai continued to sit there, looking at the people in front of him with an indifferent face. The pistol knocked on the table from time to time. I think you may have really misunderstood. It was these 4 guys who kidnapped that person. We just heard about it and decided to come and have a look. If I really know you, then I will send this girl back to you. We are doing this out of kindness, but I think you may be a little too sensitive. Looking at Jiang Hai, Izoatus said with a smile. While talking, they moved into the room, moving very slowly. After Jiang Hai heard his words, he seemed to believe them and did not react to their movement. In this way, Izo and the 8 people slowly moved into the room, but when they saw that there was only Jiang Hai in the room, they were clearly stunned for a moment, and then these people felt their hearts begin to beat faster. Only you? Looking at Jiang Hai in front of him, Izoatus said with some doubts. Although the appearance of Jiang Hai completely disrupted his thoughts, according to his original idea, they came here to pick up the girl. After taking the girl and confirming her relationship with Jiang Hai, they would take her to the casino or their territory, and then force Jiang Hai to come to the appointment himself, and then find a chance to kill Jiang Hai. Of course, they basically learned this from the movies, but now that Jiang Hai appeared here, they were a little surprised. Originally, he thought that there was no chance, but who would have thought that Jiang Hai was sitting here alone? Yes, it's just me. Hearing his words, Jiang Hai said calmly. Hey, if it's only you, then you can go to hell. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Izo had already raised his gun in an instant, aiming at Jiang Hai and was about to shoot, but Jiang Hai's speed was faster. In an instant, 4 more bullets were fired. The 4 guys standing in front of him who were holding guns were instantly shot by the bullets, and the guns flew directly to the distance. Izo was also standing in front of them. In an instant, he felt that his hands were no longer his own. He had no way to control them at all, but the piercing pain kept coming. But after all, he was also Kristen Atus's son. In such a situation, he did not admit defeat and immediately rushed to pick up the gun that had fallen. The other 4 people who were not shot also raised their guns in their hands. But at this time, Jiang Hai was still sitting in the same place, and a figure flashed behind the refrigerator. After this person appeared, he took out 2 pistols without saying a word. These 2 pistols are Czech CZ-75, the most classic model of Czech pistols. In fact, it is more suitable for men to use. It is powerful and handsome. It is much better than the CZ-83. At the same time, the two guns were also pointed at other people. If other people dared to move at this time, then she didn't mind directly shooting them. Seeing these guys who were courting death were subdued in an instant, Jiang Hai also shrugged. After sitting in the same place and changing the magazine, he slowly stood up, then walked in front of these people. After kicking away all the pistols on the ground, he squatted down. Speak. Looking at Izo-Atis, Jiang Hai said very plainly. Listening to Jiang Hai's plain voice, the people here were dumbfounded, because they didn't know what to do next. Speak? Speak what? Listening to Jiang Hai's words, Izo-Atis glared at him and said with a face full of anger. Tell me how you are courting death, who told you to kidnap Tarak, and why you ambushed me. Hearing this man's words, Jiang Hai said slowly. Although he didn't know the details of this guy's plan, this guy followed these people, and when he saw that he was alone, he even took the initiative to attack, which means that he was looking for trouble. His glasses recorded everything clearly at this time. This is not a movie. What he has to do now is an interrogation. Bah, if you have the ability, kill me, you yellow monkey. Falling into Jiang Hai's hands, Izo-Atis was also a little crazy. He knew that this time he was in trouble, big trouble. Instead of this, he might as well die. But Jiang Hai smiled, then gently stood up and glanced at Jialina. When Jiang Hai turned his head to look at the others, Jialina instantly covered Izo-Atis's mouth. Then, she exerted force on her military boots. In an instant, Izo-Atis's left index finger softly fell to the ground. His finger was directly crushed under her foot. His fingers were connected to his heart. It would be strange if Izo-Atis didn't scream, but his mouth was blocked, so he couldn't make a sound. He could only watch helplessly as Jialina broke his index finger, then moved her foot to the position of his middle finger. Then, in an instant, she stomped down, and there was a sound of bones being crushed. At this time, in the room, except for the still calm Jiang Hai, everyone's eyes were full of horror. They heard that Jiang Hai was a cattle breeder. How could a cattle breeder be so ruthless? But Jiang Hai didn't have the obligation to explain to them. He squatted down and looked at another person, looking at him very calmly. If he doesn't want to talk, then are you going to talk? Looking at this person, Jiang Hai said very calmly. It doesn't matter if you don't want to talk, I have 11 people here who can ask. Oh, 9 people besides you. Looking at this person, Jiang Hai said very indifferently, as if he really didn't want to know the news from this person's mouth. His indifference was somewhat excessive. I'll talk. Looking at Atis, whose third finger was broken, a trace of horror flashed in this person's eyes. Then after hesitating for a moment, he was ready to talk. After all, human life is very important in the United States. This is actually just a coincidence. The 4 guys over there kidnapped the girl who came to look for you, and then they knew that you and Mr. Atis had a grudge, so they asked Izo. Izo just said that he came over to take a look, but he didn't expect that you would arrive first. This person was still loyal, of course, he was also making fun of himself. According to them, they just came over to take a look, not to trouble Jiang Hai. Hearing his words, Jiang Hai smiled. This guy really talks big. At this time, Jialina had also dealt with Izo-Atis. Seeing Jiang Hai looking over, she walked directly to this person. Don't, I'm telling the truth, don't. Seeing the demoness Jialina appear, this person also panicked and shouted loudly, but halfway through, Jialina covered his mouth and stepped on his finger without saying a word. Looking at the person over there, screaming in horror and looking like he was in so much pain that he wanted to die, the others trembled. They felt that they were really too naive at the beginning. Kristen Atis was right not to trouble Jiang Hai. This Jiang Hai was not someone they could compare with. This guy was not only a cattle breeder, but he also had a strong martial strength. His hands were cold and his heart was black. He didn't give them a way out at all. Now there are 8 more questions to ask. Are you ready to answer? But the premise is that you don't treat me as a fool anymore. If you really encountered this matter by chance, you wouldn't have shot me directly when you saw me, right? Walking to the front of another person, Jiang Hai squatted down, his eyes exuding an evil light, but unfortunately, his glasses couldn't reach them. Okay, I'll talk. The effect of being frightened by Jia Lina was also infinitely magnified at this time. After hesitating for a moment, this guy was ready to talk. In fact, kidnapping Tarak was not instructed by Izo, it was done by these 4 people, but after Izo learned the news, he was ready to take the girl away and use her to threaten Jiang Hai, then kill Jiang Hai. Although the plan was very simple, the purpose was very clear, to kill Jiang Hai. I just came with him to take a look, it's not my fault. After saying that, he deliberately washed himself. But Jiang Hai didn't care about this. After laughing, he patted his face and continued to ask the people behind him. After everyone asked clearly, Jiang Hai also signaled Tarak to come out. Although Tarak is a little girl, she has seen a lot of things. With her help, she took the rope that was used to tie up these people. After tying these people up, Jiang Hai also looked for his phone and found Doyle George's phone number. This Doyle George's relationship with Jiang Hai is still very good. After all, they can be regarded as friends of life and death. When he was an intern in Winthrop, he fought side by side with Jiang Hai. Later, because of his meritorious service, he was transferred back to Boston and was directly promoted to inspector in the Boston Police Department. It is said that his family has a lot of connections, but his relationship with Jiang Hai has always been good, and they keep in touch. When Jiang Hai went to Boston a while ago, they even had a meal together. Now that such a thing has happened, he can't trust the local police. After all, this is also Chelsea's territory, and Kristen Addis has a lot of power in Chelsea. After Jiang Hai called, Doyle George heard Jiang Hai's words and immediately dispatched the police. At the same time, he notified the state. After several police cars arrived in the area, they arrested the 12 people and took them to the police station before the local police could do anything. Jiang Hai, Tarak, and Xia Yuan were also taken to the police station. Of course, after all, they were acquaintances, so they weren't handcuffed. Secondly, they weren't too serious. They just sat in the car and went over. As for Jia Lina, she drove back to Jiang Hai's manor. She still had to go back and report her safety. When Jiang Hai entered the police station, Moses Adams also came. As for the 12 people, they were all sent to the hospital by the police. Of course, everyone's hands were handcuffed, and there were guards standing outside. But at this time, outside a hospital in Boston, after a black Lincoln stopped, an anxious middle-aged man quickly ran into the hospital. After finding the room he was looking for, he was about to go inside. But just as he walked in, 2 policemen came in front of him and motioned him to stop. I just want to see my son's situation. Please, I know your speaker, and I also know the people in your police station. Seeing the 2 policemen stop him, the middle-aged man immediately said anxiously. He was really anxious now. After all, his son was in the ward in front of him, and he could only stand outside helplessly. Are you Mr. Kristen Addis? Sorry, the order from above, no one is allowed to enter the room. Hearing his words, the 2 policemen here couldn't help but look at each other, and then said very seriously. How can you do this, please, you have to understand the heart of a father. Seeing that the 2 policemen were stubborn, Kristen Addis also said with a look of horror and helplessness. This is really not possible, Mr. Addis. Hearing his words, the 2 policemen still shook their heads. This was a strict order from above. They didn't dare to let Kristen Addis go easily. This was a dead end. Izzo Addis wanted to murder Jiang Hai, even participated in the kidnapping, and took the initiative to shoot at Jiang Hai. These were all captured by Jiang Hai's Google glasses, and there was no chance to argue anything. It was not an exaggeration to say that this was irrefutable evidence. Of course, there would also be some people who would pester endlessly, but the problem was that Moses Adams was not someone to be trifled with. It was absolutely impossible for him to handle this case with irrefutable evidence. If he did, Jiang Hai would not be able to cooperate with him anymore. For lawyers, the word mistake could never exist because it was linked to money. Coupled with Jiang Hai's own strength, everyone knew that Jiang Hai would not let these people go easily. Now was the time to pick a side, so these two policemen would inevitably stick to their posts. What if I let him in? But at this moment, a slightly majestic voice came from the side of the corridor. The two policemen looked up and saw a majestic white man coming in from outside. Mr. Patterson. Seeing this majestic white man, the three people here whispered in a low voice, especially Kristen Adis. His eyes were originally a bit gray, but at this time, they glowed with a new color. Mr. Patterson, this case was ordered by the State Supreme Police, so we are doing our duty. Sorry. Looking at the man in front of them, the two policemen hesitated, then gritted their teeth and said. Just like what they said, this man named Patterson was not an ordinary person. His full name was Javi Patroni, and he was the current leader of the Massachusetts Democratic Party. Although he was only a state senator in name, he had retired from the House of Lords. His status and ability were frighteningly powerful in Massachusetts. Everyone knew that the United States was a multi-party country, but in fact, there were mainly two parties in charge, the Democratic Party and the Republican Party. Anyone who knew the history of the United States knew very well that these two parties were actually split from one party. At the beginning, there was only the Democratic Party, which was established in 1791 by some planters, farmers, and some capitalists who had connections with the slave owners in the South. Later, it was renamed the Republican Party, and the Democratic Party was officially established in 1828. They became the Democratic Party and the Republican Party. The two parties had different policies. The Democratic Party was a left-wing liberal party. They preferred a more radical approach to governance. Most of the presidents in the United States were from the Democratic Party, such as the famous Roosevelt, Truman, Kennedy, Clinton. Even the current president, Hare, was from the Democratic Party. Their power was indeed greater than the Republican Party's. Of course, the Republican Party's conservative views were also the reason why they were unpopular. In Massachusetts, every party was a stronghold of the Democratic Party. This showed how much influence this middle-aged man named Javi Patterson had here. He was actually Kristen Adis's nominal protection. Of course, he could only help him a little. After all, he was only a former member of the House of Representatives, and now he was only a state senator. In the United States, people were more particular about the cooling of the tea after the person left. He was now a person with a reputation and a tree's shadow. If you respected him, you respected him. If you didn't respect him, you didn't care. At least, he was not a match for Jiang Hai, who was now at the peak of his power. Looking at the attitude of the two policemen in front of him, it could be seen. Generally, such old people were very concerned about their reputation. The more you didn't want them to do something, the more they would do it. What's more, in his opinion, he couldn't keep Kristen Eddies' child. The only thing he could do was to help Kristen Eddies take care of his child. Now that he couldn't even help, it was really shameful. I guarantee on my reputation that you let him in for 10 minutes. If you don't let him in, I will go to the police station tomorrow and cause trouble for you, Patterson said fiercely as he looked at the two policemen. It seemed that they were really frightened by the old man's appearance. The two policemen couldn't help but look at each other hesitantly. Since Mr. Patterson is your guarantor, 10 minutes, don't make it difficult for us. Finally, after hesitating for a while, one of the policemen spoke first. Hearing that these policemen finally compromised, Patterson also smiled. Kristen Adis naturally thanked him, then hurriedly ran in. When he came in, Izzo Adis had already woken up. At first, he was sent to the hospital in a coma. The pain of his broken finger, coupled with the constant bleeding, made him lose consciousness. The hospital arranged an operation on the spot. They cleaned the bones in his finger, took out the bullet, bandaged the wound, and injected new blood. Although only a few hours had passed, Aedis had already woken up. His whole person seemed to be a little stupid. He just stared at the ceiling blankly, without speaking or moving. If it weren't for the occasional blink of his eyes, others might think that he was dead. When Aedis walked into the ward, a glimmer of light flashed in his eyes, but then it dimmed again. "Dad, I've caused you trouble." He knew that with what he had done, coupled with Jiang Hai's actions, he was doomed. Jiang Hai was not a saint. He would definitely not let him live, so he knew that he was doomed. His father couldn't save him. The only thing he felt guilty about now was that he had caused trouble for his father. He was worried that after he died, Jiang Hai would not let go of his father. Then he would be really unfilial. In fact, in terms of father-son relationship, Izzo respected Kristen very much. This was because he never talked back to his father. He would take the initiative to do what his father told him to do. If his father didn't tell him to do it, he would think for his father. These things showed that he could be regarded as a filial child. Unfortunately, he provoked someone he shouldn't have. "Silly child, what are you talking about? You'll be fine, and I'll be fine. I'll find a way. What you have to do is to rest and recover, and then wait." Looking at Aedis, Aedis whispered. He also knew that if he went through the normal legal route, his son would be dead. Although the old man outside was his backer, with the amount of tax Jiang Hai pays every year, plus the money in Jiang Hai's pocket, the old man would not be a match for Jiang Hai. After saying this, Aedis left. After watching him leave, the police on the other side didn't say anything. Patron looked at Aedis's appearance. After thinking for a while, he followed him out. "Young man, this time your son was too unwise. I just got the news that Jiang Hai became a shareholder of Google a while ago, the kind that owns shares, you. What can I say?" Walking out of the hospital, Patron sighed and said helplessly. He came to see Aedis. In fact, he had done his best. "I understand, Mr. Patron, I'm just afraid that this will involve you." Hearing Patron's words, Aedis laughed a little self-deprecatingly and said to Patron, "It doesn't matter, I still have connections in Massachusetts. No matter how strong Jiang Hai is, it won't be so easy for him to deal with me." Patron shook his head and said proudly. Hearing his words, Aedis just smiled. Then he got into his Lincoln and left the hospital. No one knew where he went. As the sky gradually darkened, Doyle George also walked into his office from outside. "Phew, today is really tiring." Seeing Jiang Hai chatting and laughing with the two beauties, he couldn't help but shake his head helplessly. Then he hung his clothes on the hanger and walked to Jiang Hai's side. "Is it done?" Seeing him coming over, Jiang Hai didn't want to occupy his chair anymore. He stood up directly and walked to the open space, while Doyle George slumped directly on the chair. "Well, it's done. This time, they are dead, but you have to be careful. Aedis is not a good person, he may do something desperate." Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Doyle George also said to them seriously. "Oh, I naturally know that, but this time, thank you very much. Come to my place when you have time, I have prepared a lot of beef and fish for you." Patting Doyle on the shoulder, Jiang Hai said with a smile. "Oh? Is this a bribe?" Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Doyle George said with a smile. Jiang Hai's beef and fish are very popular in Boston recently. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, he knew that the amount is indispensable. "Then you can also eat at my place before you leave." Shrugging, Jiang Hai said with a smile. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Doyle George also laughed. He naturally can't leave after eating, but he is quite interested in these things. "Huh, then I'll thank you in advance. Your things here are done, do you want me to send you back?" Chapter 774. It's a little late now. Do you want to stay in Boston for a night before leaving? Walking out of the police station, Jiang Hai rejected Doyle George's proposal to send them back in the police car. Moses Adams was still running around, and Jiang Hai asked Xia Yuan. Now there were 3 people here, Jiang Hai, Xia Yuan, and Tarak. Tarak would definitely follow Jiang Hai. As for Xia Yuan, Jiang Hai had to ask. After all, she still had a girl at home. It's okay. I've already asked my colleague to pick up my daughter. There shouldn't be any problems. After hearing Jiang Hai's words, Xia Yuan thought for a moment. She originally wanted to refuse, but when the words came to her mouth, she changed her mind. Indeed, she was not too worried about her daughter because she used to work 2 or even 3 jobs. So at night, sometimes she would go home very late. Although she did not stay out all night, it did not matter if she stayed out all night. However, recently, because she was promoted to the supervisor of the Xishang supermarket, her salary and treatment had improved a lot. She did not have to work part-time anymore, and her life was much better. Although she did not understand why, looking at Jiang Hai's power today, she vaguely felt that it might be related to Jiang Hai. However, she did not mean to say it, and Jiang Hai did not want to say it either. Well, let's eat something first, and then find a place to rest for the night. Hearing Xia Yuan's words, Jiang Hai also smiled, then called a taxi and went to a famous 5-star hotel in Boston. The reason why Jiang Hai was familiar with this hotel was mainly because Jiang Hai himself also had a cooperative relationship with this hotel. One of the fish he sold was from this hotel. At the front desk of the hotel, Jiang Hai originally planned to book 3 rooms, 1 suite and 2 standard rooms. With his current status, staying in a hotel and not a suite was out of the question. But after hearing that there were 2 rooms in the suite, Xia Yuan did not let Jiang Hai book another room. Tarak was also very scared at this time, so it was a good choice to live with Jiang Hai. For their proposal, Jiang Hai just shrugged and agreed. In fact, when a woman was ready to live in a room with you, it was needless to say what it meant. Especially when this woman had some intimate contact with you before this. After booking a suite, Jiang Hai and the others went up to take a look. There was a master bedroom, a guest bedroom, and 2 bathrooms. Everything was good. After looking around, Jiang Hai and the others went downstairs to eat. When they arrived at the Best Western restaurant, Jiang Hai, Tala, and Xia Yuan sat down and casually ordered some seafood. Jiang Hai and the others began to eat. No one came to find trouble with Jiang Hai. It seemed like the melodramatic story had unknowingly disappeared. After eating, the 3 of them were tired from the day's work, so they went upstairs to sleep. Originally, Jiang Hai stayed in the master bedroom, Xia Yuan and Tarak stayed in the small bedroom, but Jiang Hai just returned to his room to take off his clothes and take a shower. His room door was knocked. Jiang Hai opened the door and saw that it was none other than Xia Yuan. The public bathroom is occupied by Tarak. I wonder if I can use your bathroom to take a shower? Looking at Jiang Hai, Xia Yuan said with some hesitation. When she said that, her eyes kept drifting around. Looking at her appearance, Jiang Hai smiled and directly pulled her into the room. After closing the door, he pressed her against the door and kissed her. Although Xia Yuan was shocked by Jiang Hai's actions, she did not panic. After being attacked by Jiang Hai, she took the initiative to wrap her arms around Jiang Hai's waist and began to counterattack. Unknowingly, the clothes on the 2 of them quickly disappeared. As the 2 fell on the bed, Xia Yuan looked at Jiang Hai and took a deep breath. She whispered, I just came to take a shower. I know, but we'll take a shower together later. Looking at Xia Yuan, Jiang Hai smiled and kissed her again. At the same time, his hands were not idle. After feeling that it was about time, a low moan sounded in the room. Tarak, who had just finished showering, was drying his hair while wondering where Xia Yuan had gone. It was not until she walked to Jiang Hai's room that she heard some noise. Her small face could not help but blush. Although she did not experience this, she was not a girl who did not know anything. She knew what Jiang Hai and Xia Yuan were doing inside, so after spitting, she walked back to her room to rest. Recently, she did not have a good night's sleep. Today, she encountered such a situation. Not long after lying in bed, she fell asleep. On the other side, Jiang Hai and Xia Yuan's battle had reached its climax. Jiang Hai really did not expect this. This Xia Yuan was really amazing in this aspect. Perhaps it was because she had been empty for too long, but she could actually withstand Jiang Hai's attacks and was even constantly counterattacking. The two of them fought from the bed to the ground, then to the window, then to the sofa in the room, and then to the corner of the room. After fighting for more than 2 hours, Xia Yuan let out a sigh of relief. She was satisfied with her defeat. Like an octopus, she firmly hugged Jiang Hai's body. Jiang Hai also let out a long breath. He was actually a little tired. Feeling the sweat on the two of them, Jiang Hai carried her into the bathroom. Jiang Hai, who had already prepared a vat of hot water, slowly sat down with Xia Yuan in his arms. The warm water spread over the two of them, and their fatigue gradually disappeared. Too comfortable. Perhaps the hot water gave Xia Yuan a little strength. She hugged Jiang Hai and whispered in Jiang Hai's ear. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai was satisfied, but he did not know what to say. If you have time in the future, remember to come and play with me. I'm a little addicted. Seeing that Jiang Hai did not speak, Xia Yuan also smiled. She did not intend to marry Jiang Hai. She did not even want to confirm their relationship, but she was very obsessed with Jiang Hai's body. Hearing that Jiang Hai did not speak, she naturally knew what Jiang Hai meant. It was obviously a good choice to make it clear at this time. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai also nodded and said seriously, "Well, of course, that's not a problem." Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Xia Yuan could not help but smile. Then she continued to hug Jiang Hai, immersing herself in the impact just now. After taking a bath for half an hour, Jiang Hai carried Xia Yuan back to bed and fell asleep with her in his arms. It was a quiet night. In fact, it wasn't really a quiet night. At about 3:00 in the middle of the night, a group of people walked into the hospital where Izzo Adis was. Half an hour later, they pushed Izzo Adis out of the hospital. After getting into a black Ford MVP, they disappeared into the night. Less than 10 minutes later, the hospital's alarm rang loudly. Then Doyle George, who had just rested, immediately rushed to the hospital overnight with his men. When he saw the two state policemen who had been silently killed and the empty room, his face was as ugly as it could be. He immediately applied for a transfer order and then went to arrest Kristen Adis. However, when they arrived at Kristen Eddies' house, they found that he had already left in the afternoon. No one knew where he went, and his casino was empty. Even his relatives did not know where he had gone. Connecting the dots, it was not difficult for Doyle George to guess that these guys should have run away. Bastard. Izzo Adis was the main culprit this time. He originally promised Jiang Hai that there would be no problems. But in the end, before the night was over, the problem occurred. Thinking of this, he could not help but look a little ferocious. He immediately issued an arrest warrant, but just as the warrant was about to be signed, it was stopped by someone. Hello? Hearing the phone ring, Jiang Hai also opened his eyes in a daze. He glanced at the time on the phone. It was only 5:00, but it was Doyle George calling, so Jiang Hai picked it up. "Jiang, there's a problem." Izzo Adis ran away. Hearing Jiang Hai's voice, Doyle George's tone on the phone was a little serious and helpless. Hearing his words, Jiang Hai's sleepiness was driven away a lot. Ran away? How did he run away with that kind of injury? Hearing his words, Jiang Hai was very sure that Izzo Adis's hands were crippled. He could have run away with his feet, but how did he run away? Did he just stroll out like that? It should be his father, Kristen Adis. Damn it, I was going to issue an arrest warrant, but I was stopped by a veteran senator in the state. He said that this matter was still under investigation, and we shouldn't make too much of a fuss. We lost 2 agents, this fucking politician. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Doyle George couldn't help but curse. Hearing his words, Jiang Hai was silent. He was not worried that this guy would harm him after he ran away. He was still very satisfied with the protective force around him, but it was not Jiang Hai's style to let the other party run away like that. After hearing his words, Jiang Hai understood what Doyle George meant. He was a person in the system, so maybe he couldn't intervene in this matter. After all, the higher-ups had given orders, and he couldn't disobey. But in fact, Jiang Hai was quite satisfied with this situation. This was because if there was any enmity, he would take revenge himself. This time, he was not very happy with the help of the police, but this time, Jiang Hai was really happy to let him run away. If he ran away, Jiang Hai would have a chance to kill these guys with his own hands. I'm leaving. Remember to visit me if you have time. The next morning, after breakfast, Xia Yuan smiled at Jiang Hai again. After the two hugged, they got into a taxi and prepared to return to her home. She still had work to do today. Jiang Hai also smiled and waved his hand. After sending her to the car, he returned to his room. When he came back, Tarak woke up in a daze. Looking at her, Jiang Hai couldn't help but smile. You're up. Looking at Tarak, Jiang Hai said to her. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Tarak also nodded obediently. She knew that this was Jiang Hai's territory, so it was better for her to pretend to be obedient. You were scared yesterday, right? You're too much. Your patriarch is old and confused, and you are also confused. Don't you know to call me when you come out? If you can't, I'll pick you up. Looking at her appearance, Jiang Hai also brought up the breakfast he prepared in advance. Of course, it was ordered from the hotel. A bowl of oatmeal and a hamburger. No, that satellite phone, according to the patriarch, must be bugged. If I call you first, it may be bugged. The only people who can speak English are me and him. He has to stay in the village, so I can only come to find you. Seeing Jiang Hai bring up the food, Tarak's eyes also lit up. Without saying a word, she directly picked up the hamburger and stuffed it into her mouth. Then she ate the hamburger and drank the porridge while speaking vaguely. Slow down, no one is fighting with you. Why are you in such a hurry? What's the big deal about eavesdropping? Looking at her appearance, Jiang Hai rolled his eyes at her. He had to admit that sometimes these old people are paranoid. Take Jiang Hai for example. He never cared about these things. The US government knows where he goes. Jiang Hai didn't care. This is not freedom, this is not democracy. In Jiang Hai's opinion, this is the safest way. For example, in China, no one would say no to the installation of the Sky Eye. What democracy and freedom? They think too much. There is no absolute freedom in this world. Everyone lives in a framework. At least that's what Jiang Hai thought. Therefore, he didn't care if he was being monitored or if he was truly free. No, this time I'm bringing you something very important. No one can know about it. However, after hearing Jiang Hai's words, Tarak said with a serious face. That expression that says no one can know about it made Jiang Hai a little confused. Is it this thing? Looking at her appearance, Jiang Hai took out the letter from his pocket and asked her with some doubts. Seeing her nodding seriously, Jiang Hai couldn't help but open the letter in confusion. He wanted to see what is inside that can't be seen by outsiders. After opening the envelope, Jiang Hai found 2 things inside. One is a piece of paper, the other is a piece of animal skin. Jiang Hai looked at the paper first. What was written on it was a letter. The letter should be from the patriarch. It said that this time the tribe survived thanks to Jiang Hai, but now he wants to trouble Jiang Hai with one thing. He is going to let Tarak go to the outside world. Among the people he knows in the outside world, the most reliable person is Jiang Hai, so he asked Jiang Hai to help take care of her and let her go to school. In order to thank Jiang Hai for his help in taking care of Turok, he gave Jiang Hai the treasure of their tribe, a treasure map. Treasure map? Seeing this, Jiang Hai couldn't help but look at the animal skin. He only saw a lot of things scribbled on it. There is a red X mark in the middle. It is similar to the treasure map he saw before. Jiang Hai was a bit confused. Could it be that there really was a treasure? This treasure is real. If you know some of the history of the United States, then you should know its existence. Seeing Jiang Hai's puzzled look, Turok couldn't help but speed up her eating. After eating the hamburger and porridge, she looked at Jiang Hai seriously and said. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai was a little surprised. Does she know about this? When I came out, the patriarch was actually going to pass the position of the patriarch to me when he was old. This is also something that our tribe has been guarding for generations. You should know that the western part of the United States was built by ourselves. Looking at Jiang Hai's puzzled look, Turok said seriously. Hearing Turok's words, Jiang Hai thought for a moment. How was it built? The continent is drifting? Well, Jiang Hai knows that she is definitely not talking about this, so after thinking for a while, he shook his head affirmatively. Sigh. In the beginning, there were no people on the west coast of the United States. After all, most people came from Europe. They came from the East Coast. The east side of the United States was Australia and Huaxia. At that time, no one in Australia had the ability to sail, and although Huaxia had the ability, your country's political policy was not to go to sea, so the west coast was empty at first. In order to develop the west coast, in the 18th and 19th centuries, the United States authorities promoted the westward movement and launched a gold rush. Seeing that Jiang Hai really didn't know, Turok shook her head and said with a serious face. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai nodded. He still knows a little about the development of the West and the gold rush. The Chinese workers at the beginning were basically attracted by the gold rush and the construction of railroads. Many people died in the West. It can be said that the west of the United States was built on the bones of Chinese workers. There were also many survivors. If one were to talk about Chinese settlements in the United States, San Francisco would be the top choice. Even Los Angeles and New York are far worse than San Francisco. It is not an exaggeration to say that San Francisco is a Chinese city, even if it is still standing on the map of the United States. It's good to know this. In the beginning, our ancestors were also part of the West, but unlike those white people, we were slaves and were sent to develop gold mines. However, our ancestors were not satisfied, so they revolted and killed the evil slave owners. After that, they fled back to the Alabama mountains, but they left this map. According to our ancestors, the things depicted on this map are the location of the gold mine where they were enslaved. When they left, they blew up the gold mine, but in the secret chamber below the gold mine, there is still a lot of gold. Looking at Jiang Hai, Turok said seriously. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai's eyebrows couldn't help but raise. This story is a bit interesting. Of course, what Turok said must be to beautify his ancestors. In Jiang Hai's view, the most likely explanation is that those Native Americans were originally slaves, but when they saw the gold, they had evil thoughts, so they killed the supervisor and the boss. But with so much gold, they probably couldn't take it away, so they deliberately dug a basement, hid the gold, and then blew up the mine, waiting for time to come back and take it out. However, they did not expect that they might have stirred up a hornet's nest. They were chased from the west coast to the east coast, all the way until they hid in the Alabama mountain range. However, these people were scared out of their wits and did not come out for the rest of their lives. Later, they made up a story and left behind a map. But no matter what the reason is, Jiang Hai is most concerned about the thing inside, which is gold. Moreover, there was more than 1 million gold buried in the ground. Whether it was sold at the price of gold or at the price of antiques, it was estimated that it would be a great fortune. In his opinion, Du Feynman should be very interested in it. Last time when those people attacked the tribe, it was also because of this thing. Suddenly, Jiang Hai understood what the patriarch was afraid of. If the outside world knew that they have such a treasure map, whether it is the American government or those rich people, they will not let them go. Instead of hiding it, it is better to use it to get on good terms with Jiang Hai. Although the time they spent together was not long, he can see that Jiang Hai is a very particular person. If Jiang Hai gets these treasures, although it is impossible for him to give them all, the benefits of their tribe will not be small. And even if Jiang Hai forgot, he specially sent Tarak to Jiang Hai's side. If Tarak and Jiang Hai have any special relationship in the future, then with Jiang Hai's way of doing things, he will not treat her lightly. Tarak also said that she will learn according to the treatment of the future patriarch, which means that she will return to the tribe in the future. If Jiang Hai does not want Tarak to return to the tribe, then it is inevitable that he will take the entire Toga tribe out. Even if he follows Tarak's idea and lets her go back, with Jiang Hai's way of doing things, he will definitely not treat his woman badly. At that time, the Tarak tribe will be truly glorious, and it will be more useful than holding a treasure map. He has to admit that the patriarch made the right bet. Jiang Hai is indeed not a ruthless person. Not to mention that he and Tarak do not have that kind of relationship, just based on the treasure map that they gave him. If the treasure is real, he will definitely not let the Toga tribe be like it is now. As expected of an old man who doesn't die to be a thief. This old man is really good at reading people. Holding this treasure map, Jiang Hai admitted that he is very interested. Now, let's see if this thing is real. I'm full. What are we going to do now? Go back to your house? While Jiang Hai was meditating, Tarak had also finished eating. He put the bowl on the table and blinked his big eyes at Jiang Hai. Chapter 775. No, since we're here, let's walk around here first. Since you want to live with us, you must buy some clothes and so on. Since we're here, let's just take a look. By the way, I have to go to my company. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai thought for a moment and said to her. Since they are here, he is going to walk around Boston. Besides, he has other things to do. First, he has to send someone to see if the gold mine is still there. Second, he has to find Izzo Adis. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Tarak naturally had no objection. In fact, she felt that her clothes were quite good. It was pure animal skin. It was breathable and comfortable to wear. But the patriarch said that after coming here, she had to listen to Jiang Hai's arrangements, so she would not resist. Let's go. Seeing that she did not object, Jiang Hai also stood up, washed his face, and then looked again. After making sure that he did not leave anything behind, he went to the first floor to check out. Then the two took a taxi to Newbury Street. Newbury Street was also a shopping mecca in Boston, similar to the shopping streets in every city. Newbury Street was very eye-catching in Boston, and even in the United States. It was also known as Boston's Rodeo Avenue. It was called a street, but it was actually a block because it covered a total of 8 blocks. There were hundreds of popular shops, gourmet restaurants, and many beauty salons. The shops on both sides of the street were the most popular red brick buildings in the 19th century. They looked very elegant. Even the unique half-basement shops of that era were open for business. If you didn't look carefully, you would think you were in Europe. Of course, for Jiang Hai, he couldn't see the difference between the United States and Europe. Bitches twisted love. But there was also a point to pay attention to when shopping here. The level of the shops in the East was aristocratic, and the further west it was, the more commoner. So if you want to buy something, if it was some luxury goods, go to the East. If it was some ordinary brands, go to the West. Tarak herself didn't know much about money. Jiang Hai didn't care about money, so he went directly to the East and let Tarak look around. She liked Dior, so Jiang Hai and the others went in to buy it. Soon, when Tarak came out again, the animal skin and hiking shoes on her body changed into a set of Dior women's summer clothes this year. However, it wasn't the kind of summer dress that one would wear in high heels. Tarak had never worn high heels in his life, so it was better not to force her. She was dressed very young and beautiful, but she was wearing a pair of flat shoes. She specifically asked the shop assistant to buy them from Converse. After changing into the new clothes, Jiang Hai also bought her a few more sets of clothes. She walked out with Jiang Hai with a big smile on her face. She was a little hungry, so she decided to have lunch nearby. After lunch, Jiang Hai took her to the Tinglong Company's location in Boston. After arriving downstairs, he took Tarak directly to the Tinglong Company's floor. As soon as they walked down, a girl at the front desk stood up respectfully and nodded gently without looking at them. "Welcome to the Tinglong Company, how can I help you?" Hearing this person's voice, Jiang Hai was stunned for a moment, then after the person raised her head, he was stunned. The girl opposite him was also stunned, because Jiang Hai knew this girl, and the girl also knew Jiang Hai. "You are Kelly's classmate, you are." Looking at the girl, Jiang Hai asked with some doubts. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, the girl smiled and then said confidently to Jiang Hai, "Well, it's me, my name is Jenny Pond. You have changed a lot. But why are you at the front desk? I think it's not too much to give a talent like you a project manager." Looking at Jenny Pond in front of him, Jiang Hai asked with some doubts. In his impression, Jenny Pond was not bad looking, but the way she dressed should be completely different. She had very long straight hair, covered her face, lowered her head when she walked, and wore a pair of very old-fashioned glasses. Although she was very clean, she gave people a feeling of dispiritedness and shabbiness. But at this time, Jenny Pond was completely different. She had refreshing straight hair, but there were some curls in the hair. Her face was painted with lighter makeup that was different from the mainstream in the United States. She was wearing an office lady suit, which made people's eyes light up. If it weren't for Jiang Hai's good memory, there would be very few people who would recognize this girl and the girl from before. But what made Jiang Hai even more surprised was that he remembered that this girl was quite capable. Why was she at the front desk? Was Jing Jin purposely giving the cold shoulder to the person he had recommended? If that was the case, then there was a problem. Director Jing also joined in the same way, but you also know that my personality is very bad. If I continue to be like this, it will be difficult for me to gain a foothold in this world. So, Director Jing specially transferred me to the front desk for 3 months, so that I can change my previous temper. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Jenny Pond smiled. She was actually very satisfied with Zheng Jin's arrangement. These days at the front desk, she had learned a lot: how to unite colleagues, how to receive guests, and how to speak to whoever she met. Of course, she also saw the mess in society, but she was called by Jiang Hai, and she was protected by Zheng Jin. Even if she was good-looking, no one dared to provoke her. Otherwise, Zheng Jin was not to be trifled with. "Are you here to find Director Zheng this time?" Hearing her words, Jiang Hai also nodded with satisfaction. It was good that she was not deliberately targeting him. Seeing Jiang Hai's relieved expression, Jenny Pond also smiled, and then asked Jiang Hai with some doubts. "No, I'm here to look for Valentina and Arlsala." Hearing her words, Jiang Hai shook his head naturally, and then said to her. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Jenny Pond immediately responded, and led him to Jiang Hai's chairman's office, and then went to find Valentina and Aleppo. Speaking of these two women, no, not only the two of them, but also Belyak Trotsky and Rayla Skarder, these 4 women were now quite famous in the company. Rayla Skarder, the Samoan girl, was now the security captain of the Soaring Dragon group in this office building. In the beginning, those security guards still had some contempt for such a delicate and short girl. However, after Rayla Skarder beat them up so badly that they didn't dare to get up again within a minute, no one dared to say anything. Belyak Trotsky was Zheng Jin's bodyguard. On the surface, he was an assistant, but in fact, he was a bodyguard who followed her in and out. Valentina Baralikia and Alessera were the leaders of the two special foreign trade groups. They didn't need to talk about work, they were more there to hold down the fort. Originally, because the Tinglong Company was a newly established company, including the logistics and the airport, they were very disdainful of the Tinglong Company, and sometimes they would deliberately hold back the goods. Of course, they didn't dare to exceed the time limit, because they knew that the chief lawyer of the Tinglong Company was Moses Adams. If they dared to hold back the goods, they would be sued until they went bankrupt. But even if they didn't hold back the goods, they would try to hold back as much as possible. For example, the new fish and shrimp that arrived today, the departure time was between 7 a.m. and 10 a.m. Originally, the goods could be delivered at 8 a.m., but these people held back until 9:50 a.m., which was annoying. But after these two came, it was said that in less than 3 days, these guys were well behaved. The goods of the Soaring Dragon Group were always the first to be delivered, they would be delivered when the time arrived. They were much more famous than Shanghai. After Jenny Pond passed the message, Valentina and Aleppo came in less than 5 minutes. As soon as they came to Jianghai's office, they rushed to Jianghai's side with a smile and sat on the armrests of Jianghai's chair, one on the left and one on the right. "You came to see us. Didn't we just meet last Sunday?" Looking at Jianghai, the two women were quite enthusiastic. To be honest, now they really had Jianghai's shadow in their hearts. Jianghai was not only their buyer, but also their master. Moreover, he allowed them to walk under the sun. Most importantly, he had a certain amount of power. Just thinking about it made them feel good. In the past, no matter how outstanding they were, they still had to be careful when facing some of the elites of society, high officials, and so on, because they were the potential customers of their organization. But with Jianghai, they didn't need to be careful. Although they didn't go to the extent of being the boss, they also didn't need to act like a grandson whenever they met anyone. Jianghai really did what he had promised them. He allowed them to live under the sun as if they were one person. Therefore, in fact, although Galina and the others were usually cold, they were still very lively with Jianghai. Jianghai's Soaring Dragon Group had 2 days off every week. Basically, every Friday, these girls would go back to Jianghai's manor. The only one who couldn't go back was Du Ning, because she had to protect Qili. As for Biliak, she could also go back every half a month, because Rayla Scarter would replace her for a week. They had just met a few days ago, but now that they saw Jianghai, they were still very excited and happy. "I came here this time, first, to see you, and second, because there are 2 things I need you to investigate." Hugging the 2 girls' waists, Jianghai smiled. He could feel their attachment to him, which was a very good thing, but he still had to talk about business. Chapter 776. Today, there are 2 things I need you to do. One is to help me find a group of people, Izo Adis and Kristen Adis. These 2 guys ambushed me, and after they were dealt with, they were rescued by others. But I don't think they have left the United States yet, so I will leave this matter to you. After Jialina left, she had already told these people about what happened yesterday. The purpose was to strengthen the security of the defense. However, they did not know that Izo Adis had been rescued by someone else this morning. This was a very important matter. After offending Jianghai, they still want to live normally? They are really too naive. Even if they chase them to the ends of the earth, they will still deal with these guys, because they are also a potential threat. After hearing Jianghai's words, the eyes of the 2 women became fierce. Although they were still smiling, even Tarak felt a faint killing intent. It seems that these 2 women are not easy to provoke. Second, help me check this place. After Jianghai finished speaking, he took out the map he got from Tarak. After taking a look at the map, Sarah immediately took out a piece of paper. She didn't want to draw the map. If she wanted to draw it, she could just copy it or take a picture with her mobile phone. How simple would that be? What she was doing now was to use a code that only they could understand to record the map. Jiang Hai glanced at the map and saw that it was really messy. There were English words, numbers, and some words that were obviously in Arabic or Hebrew. It was very difficult to record. Anyway, Jiang Hai gave up after a glance. Wanting to understand this piece of paper was not an easy thing to do. About 10 minutes later, Al-Sarah also finished recording, and then put this piece of paper in the inner pocket of her clothes. Seeing that they were all done, Jiang Hai also smiled and put away the original animal skin. Originally, since Jiang Hai came, he wanted to go out with Al-Sarah and Valentina in the afternoon to play. But after the two got the task, they left first. For them, it was a very happy thing to have a task to do, so Jiang Hai didn't stop them. Then, he went to see release card store in Biliak, who had to protect Jingjin. After that, Jiang Hai was ready to go back. Of course, when he saw Biliak, Jiang Hai also saw Jingjin. But Jingjin didn't have a good impression of Jiang Hai, especially when she saw a girl beside him. Speaking of which, Jingjin was still quite loyal to Qi Jie. Jiang Hai had a lot of girls on his side, so she naturally felt uncomfortable. So, after saying goodbye to Jiang Hai, she went to do her own things. Although she didn't like Jiang Hai, she was still very concerned about the company's affairs. After saying goodbye to Biliak and the Violator, release, Jiang Hai also left. When he left, he naturally bumped into Jenny Pound. According to her, she wanted to treat Jiang Hai to a meal to express her gratitude. This was also what she heard from the people in the company. This was a way for people in China to express their gratitude. But Jiang Hai didn't lack that meal. After telling her to work hard and thank him, Jiang Hai also left. He went downstairs directly, found a taxi, and prepared to go directly back to Winthrop. While Jiang Hai was taking the taxi to Winthrop, a group of people were slowly moving in the direction of New York. There were a total of 8 people in this group. 6 of them were strong men, and 2 of them, one was in a wheelchair, and the other looked haggard. This group of people was none other than Kristen Adis and the others. Seeing his son's miserable appearance yesterday, Kristen Adis was really angry. He really wanted to fight Jiang Hai, but considering that he probably couldn't win against Jiang Hai, he had to swallow his anger. There was only hope when people were alive. He only had one son, Izzo Adis. He must protect the bloodline of his family. Therefore, he used all his ability and connections to find these 6 most loyal subordinates of his in the past. He took over the hospital and saved his son. However, after saving his son, it was only the beginning because they still had to escape. They didn't dare to drive or walk near the road. Because if they killed a police officer, even if the police didn't issue a national arrest warrant, the police in Massachusetts would definitely not let them go. So they could only walk on some small roads and move toward New York. Before leaving, Kristen Adis had already prepared. They were going to New York, where he knew someone in the underworld. Using that person's ability, they would first make a few fake identities, then use these identities to go to New Jersey, where they would take a plane to Panama. He just didn't know if his plan would be completed. Not far away on the highway, from time to time, there were sounds of police cars whistling by. They had not rested at all since 3:00 in the morning, nor had they eaten anything. They were almost out of water. Although everyone felt very tired, and hungry, they knew very well that now was not the time to rest. At the very least, they had to leave Massachusetts before they could rest. Therefore, they had been hurrying along. But they didn't notice that a motorcycle, unknowingly, had left Boston and was slowly chasing them in the direction they escaped. But according to the speed of the motorcycle, it would take a while for it to catch up. At this time, Jiang Hai and Tarak had returned to their home in Winthrop. After paying the taxi, Jiang Hai walked back to the villa with Tarak. It was the first time he came to Jiang Hai's home, so Tarak was a little nervous and scared. When he walked, he was very careful, as if he was afraid of any noise, but this was just deceiving himself. Before he walked to the front of the villa, 2 dogs suddenly barked in front of him, and then two big dogs quickly ran out of the villa and rushed to Jiang Hai, wagging their tails vigorously. Hey! These dogs are so big. Looking at the two big dogs, Turok was not afraid, but he was very excited, and he couldn't help but say. The Toga tribe also raised dogs, and they had a lot of dogs. But these dogs were basically some native dogs, and their bloodlines were very messy. They were not big, and they were not fierce, but they were very strong because these dogs had to cooperate with the people in the tribe to hunt. In Turok's opinion, if little Huang and Xiao Bai were used to hunt, they would be very good dogs. This size looked very intimidating. Yeah, they only know how to eat. Come, let me introduce you. This is little Huang, this is Xiao Bai, and this is Turok. They will be living here in the future, so let's get to know each other. Hearing Turok's words, Jiang Hai also smiled and patted the heads of the two dogs, and said to them. Although little Huang and Xiao Bai can't speak, it may be because they absorbed a lot of aura. The IQ of these two guys is actually very high, almost the IQ of a 6 or 7-year-old child. According to the domestic standard, this is already the level of a first grader, so they can understand the words of people very well. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, they took the initiative to go over and sniff Turaga's scent. Then Xiao Bai grinned and wagged its tail. It is a Caucasian dog, and little Huang, the green wolf mastiff, just turned around indifferently and squatted down. This is considered to be getting to know Turaga. Good dog, good dog. Looking at Xiao Bai's friendly action, Turaga was also very happy. She rubbed Xiao Bai's head hard and said with a smile. Looking at her appearance, Jiang Hai was relieved. It seems that her life here will not be too boring. Even if she can't play with the women at home, she has her own playmates. After watching her play with Xiao Bai for a while, Jiang Hai also took her to the villa. Walking into the villa, Qi Jia and the others were all there. Yesterday, Jiang Hai called and explained that Turaga would come. When Zhao Lina came back, she also roughly told them what Jiang Hai did. Of course, in front of them, she couldn't tell them that Jiang Hai went to shoot. She said that Turaga went out of the forest, then called Jiang Hai and asked Jiang Hai to pick her up. Of course, there were many loopholes, but Qi Jia and the others also understood that if she didn't tell them, they wouldn't be able to get anything out of it. However, for Jiang Hai to bring another girl home, these girls were a little uncomfortable in their hearts. So after Jiang Hai entered the door, they were still very warm to Turaga, but their faces were a little cold to Jiang Hai. Facing their attitude, Jiang Hai just smiled and said nothing. Then everyone took Turaga to the second floor and tidied up her room. Then Delina and Marian, who were about the same age as her, took her around. They didn't have that kind of relationship with Jiang Hai. Now that they had a new playmate, it was a good thing for them. Seeing that these girls could play together, Jiang Hai was also very happy. The most important thing in a family was harmony. Whether these things were acting in front of him or not, at least Jiang Hai himself liked this feeling. Sitting on his big sofa, Jiang Hai's eyes narrowed. In fact, he had always been a lazy person. If life could go on like this, it would be a good choice. As the sky gradually darkened, a heavy rain slowly floated down. However, at this time, there was a group of people whose mood was completely opposite to Jiang Hai's. As the sky gradually darkened, a glimmer of hope appeared in these people's eyes. But suddenly, the sound of a motorcycle came, making these people's faces instantly become ugly. Chapter 777. Be careful. Hearing the sound of the motorcycle approaching, Kristen Adis couldn't help but say to the people around him. At the same time, he glanced around. At this time, they were about to leave the territory of Massachusetts. At this time, there was a river and a highway in front of them. As long as they cross this river or the highway, they will enter the territory of New York. When they get there, they can relax a little. At least, the Massachusetts police will not easily trouble them. But this is also the most dangerous time. Hearing his words, the faces of the people around him changed, then they nodded seriously and took out their guns from behind. Their eyes were also scanning around, ready to see where the enemy was. At this time, the dark clouds that had been accumulating in the sky seemed to be about to erupt. Bean-sized raindrops fell from the sky, constantly drenching these people and the surrounding land. At this moment, the sound of the motorcycle suddenly grew louder. Then, a figure flashed in the dark night. The figure was so fast that it didn't even give these people any chance to react. They only saw the person on the figure take out 2 pistols in an instant. Bang! 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 2 of these people had already fallen in a pool of blood, and these people immediately opened fire at this time, but the speed of the motorcycle was much faster than they imagined. After landing, it disappeared into the distance in an instant. These people's bullets all hit the ground. Seeing this scene, Kristen Adis's eyes couldn't help but dim. He knew that this person was definitely not from the police, so it could only be Jiang Hai's people. If they don't kill this person, then they will have to die. Form a circle, this guy is not from the police. It's useless even if we cross the river. Kristen Adis was still very clear that Jiang Hai's people won't care. The place where they killed him was in Massachusetts or New York. There should be some trouble, but if these fugitives died, even if they knew that Jiang Hai did it, no one would seek justice for them. What's more, they couldn't represent justice themselves. In such a case, they could only fight with their backs against the wall. Hearing his words, the remaining 4 people instantly surrounded them and looked around vigilantly. But at this moment, the sound of a motorcycle could be heard again, and the motorcycle came out again. However, the speed of the car was too fast. The man held a gun in one hand and fired 3 or 4 shots in an instant. This time, it was even worse. 3 of the 4 people on the opposite side fell down. The remaining one fired his pistol wildly, but unfortunately, the pistol had a limit of bullets. With 2 clicking sounds, the empty sound of the firing pin told him that there were no more bullets. At this moment, the motorcycle that was about to escape suddenly skidded to a stop. Under their gaze, a woman in a black leather jacket stood on the spot, looked at them, and took off her helmet. In an instant, under the afterglow of the sun, a pretty face appeared in the eyes of the 3 men. Seeing this pretty face, the 3 men were stunned for a moment. They found it hard to imagine how such a pretty woman could be so ferocious. She killed 5 of their brothers without blinking, but fortunately, their reaction was very fast. The man who was still alive picked up his companion's pistol and was about to attack, but at this time, the woman also made her move. She raised her gun and shot the man between his eyebrows. If someone saw it this time, they would find that the woman had shot the man between his eyebrows. This was also the reason why she was not worried that these people would get up again. 6 people, each with a bloody hole in their heads, were naturally dead. Among the people who were still standing, only this woman, Kristen Adis, and Izzo Adis, who was sitting in a wheelchair and had been scared out of his wits. This woman's skills had really left a deep impression on him. He had never thought that a person could take care of those seemingly well-made people so easily. It seems that I can't escape this time. Looking at the woman who stopped the motorcycle and walked closer and closer, Kristen Adis smiled bitterly and hugged his son's head. The father and son touched each other's heads, and Kristen looked at Izzo. The rain in the sky did not dim the light in the father's eyes. Remember, as long as there are leaves flying, the fire will burn. The shadow of the fire shines on hope, and new leaves will sprout. I'm sorry, I can't watch my only son get married and have children, but you must live. Remember, you must live. Kristen Adis looked at his son and said with a smile. His big hand also stroked Izzo Adis's face. Now that they had come this far, was there any need to talk about hatred? It should be, but if he had the chance to do it again, he would still do it. If he could go back in time, then he would have stayed far away from Jiang Hai. A father is willing to do anything for his child, even if it means sacrificing his own life. Dad, you. Hearing his father's words, Izzo was a little scared at this time. He had a feeling in his heart that he seemed to know what his father was going to do. Looking at Izzo's appearance, Kristen Adis chuckled, then in an instant, he pushed his son's wheelchair into the distant river. He shouted and directly bumped into the woman who was coming over. Seeing his movements, the woman did not immediately react. She raised her hand and fired several shots, but she didn't know if this guy was really lucky or the rain hindered her performance. The bullets flew past Izzo's body, and the only one that hit him was his leg. Just as she was about to aim and shoot again, Kristen Adis rushed over and pounced on her without saying a word. Seeing this, the woman's eyes narrowed and she instantly withdrew her gun. At the same time, she pulled out a finger blade from her boot. She didn't give Kristen Adis any chance at all. The finger blade instantly pierced into the back of his head, and his body stiffened. As the finger blade was pulled out, Kristen Adis fell to the ground powerlessly. When the woman was about to chase Izzo Adis, she found that Izzo Adis had fallen into the river. She immediately rushed to the river, but only saw his wheelchair. As for Izzo Adis, he had disappeared. Seeing this, her eyes narrowed and she couldn't help but curse herself. What the hell is going on? She immediately walked a few steps to the river, but only saw his wheelchair. As for Izzo Adis, he had disappeared. Seeing this, her eyes narrowed and she couldn't help but curse herself. Hello, Jiang Hai, the mission failed. Izzo Adis escaped. Then she helplessly pressed her Bluetooth headset. On the other side, Jiang Hai's cell phone in Winthrop also rang at this time. Picking up the phone, the woman on the other side, to be exact, Valentina said with some depression. This is the first time she has performed such a mission in Jiang Hai. Oh. What about the others? Hearing Valentina's words, Jiang Hai couldn't help but ask with some doubts. The others have been dealt with. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Valentina said immediately. Oh, it's okay. The most important thing is that you are not injured. That guy, if there is a chance in the future, I will deal with him. After you deal with him, you can go back. It's already very late. Hearing Valentina's words, Jiang Hai said in a flat tone. The heavy rain will cover all traces. They are the most professional, so they know how to take advantage of this. Not long after she disappeared, in the turbulent river, an unconscious figure appeared on the surface of the river. Following the current, he rushed forward. After an unknown amount of time, he stopped on a shoal. His condition didn't look too good. At this moment, a small group of figures that looked rather pathetic walked out of the forest in the distance. These people were fully armed, and the person in the lead had a large patch on his face, as if he had encountered a fire. Beside him was a person wearing mountaineering clothes. The heavy rain continued to fall. With the sound of a horn, the shuttered door outside the garage of a small villa in downtown Boston slowly opened, and then Valentina and her motorcycle slowly drove into the garage. At this time, in addition to this motorcycle, there were 3 other cars, a Porsche Boxster, a Lotus Elise, and a Volvo C70. They were all sports cars, but although they were sports cars, they were actually not expensive. The Porsche Boxster, the best GTS version in China, was sold for about $1,150,000. It was even cheaper in the United States, less than $80,000. The Lotus Elise was about $700,000, and was sold for more than $60,000 here. The Volvo C70, which was not sold in China, had a guide price of $600,000, and was sold for more than $60,000 here. Therefore, it was still very good to buy a car abroad. At least in terms of price, there was a lot of flexibility. The owners of these 3 cars were Alfred Sala, Belyak Trotsky, and Ray Liscarter. Valentina's motorcycle was not to be underestimated. The price of this motorcycle was not much cheaper than these cars. This motorcycle was a BMW HP4, which sold for more than $300,000 in China, and was sold for nearly $50,000 here. Chapter 778. You got drenched. Who told you not to buy a car? Looking at Valentina, who was drenched all over, Sarah said with a smile. Both of them used to be alpha wolves and now led a group. Valentina and Sarah were both competitors and friends. Beliak used to be a wolf, while Lalizi was not even a wolf, but a tarantula. Therefore, in terms of rank, they were not on the same level as Valentina and Sarah. Although they were treated the same in Zhang Hai's place, they dared not show off when Zhang Hai was not there. Usually, if Valentina and Sarah did not ask them, they would not dare to joke around. Your car is too slow. When Zhang Hai and the others went out to perform tasks, in addition to their weekly salary, they also received a salary from the group. In addition to this, the rental money belonged to Zhang Hai, and each of them had $150,000. This money was used to buy equipment, guns, and cars. The rest was their own. When they went out to carry out missions, the organization would also give them money, but the things they bought had to be returned to the organization after the mission. However, they still had their vision. They were very clear about what was good and what was suitable for them, so everything was well prepared. For example, the motorcycle that Valentina was riding now was quite famous. At present, the fastest motorcycle in the world should be the Dodge Tomahawk, but this kind of motorcycle was not allowed to be on the road. If it was on the road, the police would arrest it. It was the same in the United States. Such a motorcycle was not allowed to be on the road. In addition to this car, there were only two top motorcycles, one was the Falcon, and the other was the HP4. But everyone in the manor knew that Zhang Hai was different from Japan. The Falcon was a motorcycle of Suzuki, so she bought the HP4. It should be known that this motorcycle was much faster than a Bugatti Veyron in terms of acceleration. Yes, compared to a super sports car, this motorcycle was not much slower. Generally, domestic sports cars with a price of less than 1 million, or even 10 million, were not as fast as this motorcycle. The only thing that was definitely faster than this motorcycle was an F1, but it was not on the road. Hearing Valentina's words, Sarah curled her lips, then threw a bath towel over to her. At this time, Valentina had already taken off the leather jacket outside. This leather jacket was indeed very powerful, it was specially customized. This leather jacket had 3 functions. First, it was bulletproof, second, it was waterproof, and third, it could block heat and infrared rays, so that people would not discover her existence. In fact, everyone had such a leather jacket, but some were leather jackets, and some were other clothes. After taking off the leather jacket, Valentina didn't care about these things. She took off her vest and underwear, then took the bath towel. While drying her hair, she walked upstairs. The leather jacket was hung up, and the vest and underwear were directly put into the washing machine. Then she sat on the sofa in the living room and watched TV. Sarah and the others also followed behind her. Looking at Valentina's appearance, Sarah thought for a moment and sat down. This time, the task was not completed. Have you thought about what to do next? Looking at Valentina, Sarah thought for a moment and asked her. Hearing her words, Valentina couldn't help but sigh and put down her feet that were originally on the coffee table. When the rain stops, I'll search along the shore. This is a stain on my record. I failed my first mission. Although Zhang Hai didn't blame me, why do I feel so uncomfortable in my heart? Hearing Eyal's words, Wagner said with some annoyance. To be honest, this was the first time that she didn't complete a mission, causing her to feel so uneasy. In the past, she would be very worried if she couldn't complete a mission. She was worried that the organization would punish her. However, ever since she became an alpha wolf, she no longer had to worry about these problems. This was because her identity allowed her to accept missions that she couldn't complete. But this task was so simple, so easy, and it was given by Zhang Hai, the most important person in her heart, but she didn't complete it. To be honest, her heart was a little flustered, not because of fear, but because of guilt. I hope your luck is good. Shrugging her shoulders, Sarah looked at Valentina and said. She couldn't comment on this matter. But even if Jiang Hai doesn't say anything, don't forget that there are two more powerful existences in Jiang Hai's family. Whether it was Galena or Azalina, both of them were much stronger than them. They were unwilling to lose just like that. As Al-Sarah's voice fell, the living room became quiet, only the sound of the TV kept echoing. At this moment, a pizza advertisement was broadcast on the TV, which made the girls raise their eyebrows. Do you want to eat pizza? Looking at the others, Lei Lizzie asked them. That's a good idea. Hearing her words, the other three people's eyes lit up and said with a smile. Hearing her words, everyone picked up their mobile phones and ordered takeout. As for the task, wait until the rain stops. The rain in summer is like this, it comes quickly and goes quickly. Especially in a coastal province like Massachusetts, after almost 2 hours of heavy rain, after the night was completely dark, the rain slowly subsided, and then the dark clouds in the sky gradually dispersed. As a bright moon shone in the sky, everyone also fell asleep. At this moment, in an abandoned cottage on the outskirts of Connecticut, a group of people were warming themselves over a bonfire. There were some rabbits and fishes on the bonfire. On the other side of the bonfire, there was an unconscious person. Connecticut is located next to Massachusetts and New York. It is bordered by Massachusetts to the north, New York to the west, Rhode Island to the east, and the sea to the south. It faces Long Island in New York. This state is most famous for two things. One is Yale University, and the other is the famous rich state in the United States. In 2005, it was ranked as the state with the highest per capita income in the United States, and that was an undeserved reputation. Such a high-income state is destined to have land worth a lot of money, and there are fewer people who will be farmers and ranchers. Therefore, in the area of Jianshu, to be honest, there are not many people, and it looks a bit desolate. The weather after the rain is a little cold, and this unconscious person is covered in water. As the cold wind blows, he can't help but shiver. He suddenly woke up and looked around in horror. As soon as he moved, the people on the other side also noticed him. Then two people came over and squatted in front of him. You, who are you? Where is this? Looking at the people in front of him, Izzo-Adis said with a horrified face. Because the person in front of him at this time is really terrifying. His face is smeared with various colors of oil paint, and he looks very embarrassed. His clothes are scraped, but he looks extremely fierce. He has a gun on his back and a gun on his waist. When he squats down, he can see the bandages wrapped around his palms. At first glance, he seems to have struggled from the line of life and death. It would be strange if he is not fierce. Now is not the time for you to ask me, but the time for us to ask you. Boy, who are you? Why did you appear by the river? Looking at you dressed like this, you should have money. We saved you, are you not going to give us a reward? Looking at Izzo-Adis in front of him, the man smiled disdainfully, and then said word by word. Hearing his words, Izzo-Adis couldn't help but be a little confused. My name is Izzo-Adis. I don't have much money now. As for why I fell into the river, it was because I was pushed down by someone. But as long as you take me to New York, I think I will give you some reward. After all, he has seen the world before. Although Izzo-Adis is scared, he did not panic. Instead, he said calmly. Tell me, what is your name? Hearing his words, the people here did not respond, but a man in a mountaineering suit sitting next to the fire shouted, then walked quickly to Izzo-Adis and asked him with shining eyes. I said, my name is Izzo-Adis. Do you know me? Looking at the middle-aged man in front of him, Izzo thought about it carefully. It seems that he doesn't know him, but why does he know me? I know Chelsea's Kristen Adis. What is your relationship with him? Looking at Izzo-Adis, the middle-aged man smiled and tried to be as polite as possible, then said to him. Kristen Adis is my father. Hearing that he knows his father, and then thinking of his father, Izzo-Adis could not help but lower his head. He still remembers the picture of his father's last moment in his mind. Kristen is your father? Then why are you here? I remember that Kristen's power in Boston is not small. Looking at him, the middle-aged man in front of him said with some doubts. It's all because of Jiang Hai. My father has been killed by him. Speaking of this, Izzo's eyes were full of deep hatred. Chapter 779. Jiang Hai. Hearing these two words, these people's eyes instantly stood up, and then a bald man with a seriously burned face rushed out of the fire and picked up Izzo Adis without saying a word. Tell me, what's the matter with Jiang Hai? A pair of fierce eyes stared at Izzo Adis and roared angrily. I. Looking at the seriously disfigured man, Izzo Adis was a little stunned and didn't know what to say. Well, don't scare this child, his body can't bear you like this. Seeing that Izzo Adis didn't speak, the man turned around and was about to slap him, but he was stopped by the people next to him. Hearing the middle-aged man's words, a trace of hesitation flashed in the fierce man's eyes, and then he threw him on the haystack. Then he glared at Izzo Adis fiercely and turned back to the fire. As for the middle-aged man, he slowly squatted down and looked at Izzo Adis in front of him and said with half-squinted eyes. As you can see, your father and I are indeed old friends, and that guy, no, it can be said that Jiang Hai has a grudge against all of us. That guy's face is Jiang Hai's masterpiece, but I have never heard of Jiang Hai. Can you tell me about him? By the way, tell me about the conflict between you and him. Looking at Izzo Adis, the middle-aged man said with a smile. Jiang Hai. He is a strange man, a very strange man, because I don't know how to describe him. He came to the United States in the winter of the year before last and spent $280 million to buy a manor. At that time, everyone laughed at him, saying that he was a fool from Huaxia, but a year later, this guy moved everyone. Hearing the middle-aged man's words, Izzo Adis also talked about Jiang Hai. He knows that he is now on the chopping block. If he doesn't behave, he may not see the sun tomorrow. He remembers what his father said, he has to be strong and live on. Then he told the middle-aged man in front of him about Jiang Hai. It is said that the person who knows you best is not your friend, but your enemy. Although Jiang Hai and Kristen Adis have only been enemies for a few days, he still knows a lot about Jiang Hai, including how he came to the United States in the first place. His father even knew that he went to the NBA All-Star Game the year before last and defeated Justin Bieber. His father knew about it, and then he sold his beef and got the 3 highest scores. After connecting with Walmart, he sold more than $1 billion in beef alone. At the same time, he did not stand still and was still raising fish. This year's beef sales were still the same as last year, but the quantity increased and the price increased again. According to Kristen Adis's estimation, Jiang Hai's beef sales this year are likely to reach $2 billion. After paying half of the taxes, he still has $1 billion left. At the same time, the fish farm is probably not bad. In the eyes of others, Jiang Hai may just be a rich man, but this is the United States, and the rich are everything. No one would have thought that Jiang Hai had such a strong fighting quality, and also raised such a group of women. Izzo Adis did not think about this. In his eyes, Jiang Hai was like an unguarded rich man. So if he wanted to mess with him, he could mess with him. But this mess would separate him from his father forever. His father still had to see more thoroughly than he did. How could a rich man like Jiang Hai not have bodyguards? How could he not have trump cards? Do you think you are shooting a movie? The king has returned. Everything has to be said about a lone hero. Jiang Hai was not a lone hero. Although he did not play with quantity, he played with quality. From how Jiang Hai got rich, how much influence he has now, and why he is like this, Izzo Adis told everything to the middle-aged man in front of him. Hearing Izzo Adis, the middle-aged man did not interrupt him. After he finished speaking, the middle-aged man pondered for a moment and asked him, you just said that you kidnapped an Indian girl and wanted to force Jiang Hai to come over, right?
Yes.
Hearing the middle-aged man's words, Adis nodded helplessly. They used such a dirty trick, but they still lost, and lost so miserably. God really wants to kill him. Are you sure it's an Indian girl who just came out of the mountains? Looking at Adis, the middle-aged man asked seriously. I'm very sure. The person who kidnapped her told me very clearly that this girl just came out of the mountains and came to Jiang Hai to give him something, but I don't know what it is. Hearing the man's words, Adis said seriously. Hey, I know what it is. I thought there was no chance, but now it seems that the opportunity has come again. Hearing Adis's words, the middle-aged man chuckled and said to the people behind him, Hey, we have work to do again. Then he turned his head again and looked at Adis in front of him. Young man, let me introduce myself. My name is Lynch Walter. I am an explorer. You. Are you interested in revenge? Looking at Adis in front of him, the middle-aged man, oh no, Lynch Walter invited him with a smile on his face. You got up so early, why don't you sleep a little longer? Walking down the stairs, Jiang Hai looked at Tarak, who was lying in front of the fish tank curiously looking at the golden dragon swimming in the water, and asked with some doubts. I can't sleep. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Tarak looked at him and said a little cautiously. Just treat this place as your own home. Since you're up, why don't you accompany me for a walk? Looking at Tarak's appearance, Jiang Hai walked over with a smile. He knew that Tarak's current mood could not be offset by Jiang Hai's words of treat it as your own home. He could only let her slowly adapt to this place. Well, okay, by the way, what kind of fish is this? Can it be eaten? Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Tarak smiled with satisfaction, then pointed to the fish in the fish tank and asked Jiang Hai. It was the first time she saw this kind of fish. This fish can be eaten, but basically no one will eat it, because this kind of fish is very expensive. Look at this fish tank, the cheapest one, I sell it for $100,000. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai thought for a moment, then said to her with a smile. Yes, Jiang Hai had spent, well, to be exact, donated $100,000 in exchange for it. After such a long time, these arowana have been completely reborn. Each arowana has aura injected by Jiang Hai. Although it is not much, it is enough for these arowana to use. Jiang Hai did not do it to increase their intelligence, but to make these fish grow better, that's all. These fish now all have the best appearance. Although the gold dragon did not transform into a red dragon or blood dragon, each and every one of them looks excellent. When Jiang Hai was playing, he took pictures and posted them on his WeChat moments. His friend, Huang Yunfei, who came to his place before, saw it. Then, when he was resting, he showed off to his colleagues. In the end, his boss saw it. When the boss saw Jiang Hai's fish, he directly asked if he was willing to sell it. He offered $600,000 for the smallest gold dragon, but Jiang Hai did not sell it. He was still counting on these gold dragons to make his white gold arowana. If he sold it now, it would be worthless. Wow, that's exaggerated. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Tarak could not help but be a little speechless. She knew Jiang Hai was rich, but she did not know how much money Jiang Hai had. Looking at the fish tank, the cheapest one is $100,000, then this fish tank is worth millions. Thinking of this, she could not help but gently stick out her tongue. She really does not understand the hobbies of rich people. Let's go. Let's go to the manor and take a look. Looking at her, Jiang Hai waved his hand and led her to the manor. As soon as they walked out of the door, Jiang Hai could not help but take a deep breath. The rain last night made the ground and the air a little moist. In addition, they were by the sea, so naturally, moisture was indispensable. But Jiang Hai was already a little used to it. When Tarak came out, the first thing she paid attention to was not this, but the two big dogs that were running around in the grass. These two guys would run around every morning, not caring if the grass was wet or not. Instead, they played very happily. When they heard the sound, they also looked in the direction of the villa. When they saw Jiang Hai and Tarak coming out, they quickly ran over and kept circling Jiang Hai. In the end, after Jiang Hai kicked them, they went to play with Tarak. Jiang Hai casually walked in front. Today, he wanted to bring Tarak to familiarize himself with the manor. After all, she will be living here in the future. Seeing Jiang Hai walk away, Tarak played with the dogs while following Jiang Hai along the corridor that Jiang Hai specially built for the manor. Let me introduce you to the manor first. First, I will give you a brief introduction of my manor. Here is the vegetable field. We grow our own vegetables. Next to the vegetable field is the vineyard, but it is still not ripe yet. After the vineyard, on the far right is the cowshed, the stable and the cowherd's nest are also there. If you walk further, you will reach my pier. The other side of the pier can be walked back, but you will have to pass through a forest. There are many fierce beasts in the forest, so if you don't have to, don't go in easily. While walking, Jiang Hai explained the situation of his manor to Tarak. Tarak also listened carefully, fearing that he would miss something. Chapter 780. It's too hot. Sitting under the shade of the tree, Jiang Hai looked at the sky helplessly. He had to admit that there were 4 seasons in this year, and there were hot and cold times. In fact, it was fine when it was cold. Jiang Hai's home had floor heating. Even if it was cold, he wouldn't freeze. But this heat really made Jiang Hai feel a little helpless. He was lazy and didn't have any energy at all. In fact, Boston was still fine. After all, it was located in the north, and it was next to the ocean. So in summer, it was much cooler here compared to the central and southern parts of the United States, where it was often 40 degrees. The highest temperature was about 30 degrees, and because of the heat absorption of seawater, the temperature difference between day and night was still very large. But Jiang Hai still felt very hot. He didn't want to move as he was paralyzed here. In fact, he could go back to the house to enjoy the air conditioner. In the past, Jiang Hai liked to enjoy the air conditioner because it was really cool. Although he felt a little suffocated because he had to close the windows when the air conditioner was turned on, since Jiang Hai had the dragon balls, he had no interest in the air conditioner. He preferred natural air, but the problem now was that natural air was also very hot. Gently wiping the sweat on his face, Jiang Hai played with the mobile phone in one hand, but the other hand was fanning himself. Because it was too hot recently, Jiang Hai didn't go around to catch little elves, so he put the game aside for the time being. Moreover, there were no dojos and supply points near his home, which was very troublesome. After all, there were no landmark buildings. He opened the WeChat installed on the mobile phone, which could be used abroad. In fact, it could be used as long as there was internet. Jiang Hai's account had been changed to a global call at the very beginning, so he could make calls anywhere. Although the phone bill was a little expensive, did Jiang Hai lack this little money? Really, after opening WeChat, a picture popped up that made Jiang Hai stunned. It was a picture of autumn with 2 big words written on it, beginning of autumn. Seeing this scene, Jiang Hai couldn't help but blink. It's Liqiu. Seeing this, Jiang Hai immediately flipped open the calendar. Sure enough, it was Liqiu today. When he thought of Liqiu, Jiang Hai's thoughts couldn't help but drift back to a long, long time ago, when his parents were still alive. Northeastern people love to eat dumplings and noodles, so in the northeastern part of Huaxia, it was either dumplings or noodles during festivals. It was inevitable to eat dumplings at the 30th Lunar New Year. Spring pancakes were eaten at the beginning of spring. Noodles were eaten at the beginning of summer. Dumplings were also eaten at the beginning of autumn because there was meat inside. Dumplings were eaten at the beginning of winter. Usually, they were also particular about eating dumplings when they got on the bus and noodles when they got off the bus. As long as they went out, such as to attend a meeting or go out to play, they had to eat dumplings before they left. This also showed how much northeastern people loved to eat dumplings. Jiang Hai was a very pure northeastern person, so he also liked to eat dumplings, but there weren't many opportunities to eat dumplings. This was because no one here knew how to make dumplings. Xiaoye knew how to make dumplings, but she was the only one who knew how to make dumplings. There were too many people here. Qi Jia, Chia, Feng Yunqin, Ai Xiaoxi, Daliana, Marian, Aphrodite, Dana, Hilda, Paige, Shira, Ohilia, Bridget, Janice, Wallace Shelley, Galena, Azalina, and Tarak. Just the women here, Jiang Hai had 18. Each person ate 30 dumplings, which was 540 dumplings. In addition, Jiang Hai had to eat 40 to 50 dumplings, which was 600 dumplings. This would exhaust Chia to death. So usually, when Chia didn't say anything, Jiang Hai and the others didn't think of eating dumplings. But now, looking at the season, Jiang Hai suddenly had the intention to eat this thing. Let's go and discuss with them. Thinking of this, Jiang Hai, who had just eaten breakfast, suddenly felt hungry, so he rolled down from his recliner and walked into the room. When he entered the room, he just saw Chia and Wallace Shelley sitting on the sofa watching TV. Now, the people in Jiang Hai's villa had their own division of labor. Chia was responsible for cooking, of course. In addition to breakfast, lunch, and dinner, there were people helping Chia. Wallace Shelley was mainly responsible for the application of information. Don't look at her delicate appearance, she was an expert in information, and her hacking skills were first class. It was precisely for this reason that she didn't sacrifice her body in exchange for information in the organization. She only needed a general direction, and she could find what she wanted to know. A while ago, when Valentina went after Izzo and the others, the police couldn't find them. However, she was able to find out where Izzo and the others were through some clues. From this, it could be seen that Wallace Shelley's strength was indeed not bad. But unfortunately, Izzo's location was not found, and Valentina had been very depressed about this. When she came back last week, she took the initiative to ask Jiang Hai to punish her. In the end, Jiang Hai spanked her 20 times, but as a result, Jiang Hai felt something and took her blood. Then Azalina next to her asked, was this a punishment or a reward? She couldn't understand some of it. Although Izzo's case was no longer believed, Valentina was still investigating these people. If she couldn't find these people, she wouldn't be able to eat or sleep in peace. Recently, Wallace Shelley had been following up on Izzo's matter. Jialina and Azalina basically stayed together all day long. Azalina was obsessed with magic and would wander around the manor aimlessly, while Jialina would wander around with her. At the same time, Jialina was also the most knowledgeable about guns. She liked guns very much. She liked all kinds of guns. Therefore, if she saw two women strolling around in the manor, one of them dismantling a gun and then reassembling it, she wouldn't be surprised, because it was a very normal thing. Every morning, Aphrodite and the others would go to the vineyard to work. If there wasn't any work in the vineyard, they would go to the vegetable fields to take a look. They had something to do every day. Recently, Delina, Marian, and Tarak were attending classes. This was mainly because of Tarak and Qi Jie. In the letter that the patriarch sent to Jiang Hai, he said that he hoped that Tarak could come out and learn some knowledge. And the best way to learn knowledge was naturally to go to school. But Tarak's knowledge was all learned from the patriarch. The patriarch learned from his comrades during World War II, and also self-taught himself. How good could he be? It was already good that Tarak could speak English. He didn't teach her anything else, and Tarak was already 18 years old this year. According to her age, she should be going to university. But her level wasn't even high school, an elementary school student might be better than her. After understanding this situation, Jiang Hai thought for a moment. With her age, it was impossible for her to go to primary school with a bunch of kids. So if she wanted to go to high school, she should go to high school. Because of this, Jiang Hai enrolled her in Winthrop High School. Of course, she would come back to sleep every day. In any case, Hua Lizi and the others usually didn't have anything to do. Sending her to school wasn't a problem, but there was a problem. What about her previous knowledge? At this time, the patriarch, who usually had the responsibility of being a doctor, shouldered the responsibility of teaching her. Delina and Marian's level of knowledge was not much worse than Tarak's, so they were also sent to learn by Jiang Hai. Ai Xiaoxi and Feng Yunshen had been very busy recently because they were really very free. In addition, because they had been models in the past, they had met a lot of women who looked like they had some money, but in reality, they didn't have much money, but still had to pretend to be ostentatious. When women were together, other than their respective husbands and boyfriends, they also talked about bags, clothes, and makeup products. These were all things that they had to talk about. So the two of them recently became addicted to buying things on behalf of others. Now, everyone in the town knew that they were Jiang Hai's women. Naturally, when they went to the town to buy things, it was basically the purchase price. And these makeup products, bags, clothes, and so on in the United States, although they weren't top luxury brands, when they were brought back to China, there were inexplicably 13 boxes. So when they were usually seen, they were either holding a computer or a mobile phone. Jiang Hai was also used to this. He was also very happy that they could find something they were willing to do. Jiang Hai was also quite happy. Otherwise, it would be quite boring for them to stay at home all day long. Seeing Jiang Hai come in, Qi and Wallace Shelley couldn't help but look at Jiang Hai. "Why aren't you lying down?" Seeing Jiang Hai, who had always been relaxed, come in, the two women couldn't help but ask him with a smile. "Hey, today is Liqiu, so I think let's eat dumplings today." Looking at Qi, Jiang Hai said with a smile. "Eating dumplings is okay, but it's very tiring." Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Qi frowned. She was not the kind of person who would refuse others, so after hearing Jiang Hai's words, she first agreed, and then said with some helplessness, "Let's help together. You can tell us what to do. As a Northeasterner, you can't not eat dumplings all day long." Listening to Chia's words, Jiang Hai said with a smile. Hearing what he said, Chia thought about it and nodded. To be honest, she also wanted to eat dumplings. Since Jiang Hai said so, then everyone could also prepare. The first preparation to make dumplings was to knead the dough. Hearing that Jiang Hai could ask others to come and help, Chia went to knead the dumpling dough first. A large basin of dough was first distributed there. After all, they had to make 600 or 700 dumplings, so the amount of dough was indispensable. Chapter 781. The dough is ready. After seeing that the noodles had started to ferment, Chia looked at Jiang Hai and said with a smile. Hearing Chia's words, Jiang Hai couldn't help but smile. Then he started to think about what kind of fillings to make. In the Northeast, there were 4 kinds of fillings for dumplings. The first one was chives, the second one was cabbage, the third one was pickled cabbage, and the fourth one was sansien. Everyone had eaten chives. It was said to be good for men and was also known as aphrodisiac. This thing was very popular in China, but foreigners didn't eat leeks abroad because leeks had a very bad smell. Chives were also called vegetarian meat in Buddhism. True Buddhists didn't eat chives. Americans also felt that the taste was very strange. Most importantly, chives were particularly easy to get worms. The worms were called leeks. They were very harmful and disgusting, so no one ate them in the United States. Jiang Hai usually liked to eat scrambled eggs with chives, so he planted some, but it was very little. It should be a perennial plant. After a piece was cut, another piece would grow, but because it grew too much, it didn't taste good. The best chives were planted in March. Now, in August, they didn't taste good anymore. There was no need to talk about cabbage. Everyone knew about cabbage. Jiang Hai had planted a lot of it in his manor. Pickled cabbage was different in Huaxia because of the difference between the north and the south. In the south, the pickled cabbage was also pickled, but it was soaked in big leaf green, also known as green cabbage. In the advertisement, it was the Lao-Tan pickled cabbage. It was used to make pickled cabbage fish, pickled cabbage vermicelli, and so on. The pickled cabbage in the north is pickled cabbage. After being pickled, it is sour and delicious. When used to make dumplings, it will not be very refreshing and will not be too greasy. However, Jiang Hai does not like to eat this kind of thing, and now there is no pickled cabbage. It was soaked in autumn and eaten in winter. Dumplings with three delicacies basically referred to chives, meat, and shrimps. But as mentioned earlier, chives were not very delicious now. Most importantly, foreigners didn't eat chives, so Jiang Hai and Chia felt that it was a little troublesome after discussing it. Don't tell me you want cabbage? If it really didn't work, they could only make cabbage and meat. What's there to think about? We can make whatever stuffing we want. It's not like we're trying to sell it. Hearing the conversation between Jiang Hai and Chia, Huali Shelley looked at them and asked. That's true. Then what kind of filling should I make? Hearing her words, Jiang Hai and Chia looked at each other, then laughed self-deprecatingly. They looked at each other, then began to discuss. You must have pork in your dumplings. The fish and shrimp here are not bad. Why don't we make a cabbage fish, shrimp, and pork dumpling? Thinking for a moment, the main ingredient of the dish can only be cabbage, but there are many choices for meat. They can choose anything they want. They added cabbage because they were afraid that it would be boring to eat all meat. Cabbage is refreshing. Okay, I'll go and prepare these things first, and then call them back. They can help in a while. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai patted his forehead and said eagerly. Originally, this proposal was proposed by him, so naturally now it's up to him. Thinking of this, he wanted to get up and leave, but was stopped by Chia. Why are you in such a hurry now? It's almost noon. When they come back for lunch, you can tell them. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai scratched his head. It seems that he was a little too excited. Smiling awkwardly, Jiang Hai and Chia also began to discuss how to make these dumplings. The dumplings were wrapped in different ways, and the cooking method was different, but the name was also the same. Boiled dumplings were called water dumplings, used dough, and tasted good with soup. After eating, a bowl of dumpling soup would melt the original food into the original soup, and it would be very comfortable. Steamed dumplings were called steamed dumplings, used dough, and the method of mixing dough was different. Fried dumplings were called pan-fried dumplings, and pan-fried dumplings also had to be fried in water. Using dead dough, they tasted fragrant and crispy, but eating too much would make the stomach uncomfortable because it was not easy to digest. After Jiang Hai and Chia discussed it, they decided to boil a portion and steam a portion. Unknowingly, it was time for lunch. Aphrodite and the others were also busy all morning. After returning home, after taking a cold shower, everyone prepared lunch together. While eating, Jiang Hai told them about the dumplings they were going to eat tonight. Although everyone did not know how to make dumplings, their enthusiasm for eating dumplings was very good, especially Delina and Marion. Last year, Jiang Hai took them with him when he went back for the new year. It was the new year, and they didn't always eat dumplings in the Northeast. After eating dumplings for a while, they became addicted to eating dumplings, but unfortunately, they haven't eaten dumplings since they came back. As for the others, they had only heard of eating dumplings before, but few had eaten authentic ones. Of course, Chia, Chi Jia, Ai Xiaoxi, and Feng Yunchen from Hua Xia often ate dumplings. Now that they heard that Jiang Hai wanted to eat dumplings, they also wanted to eat dumplings. After deciding to eat dumplings in the evening, everyone began to work in batches. Getting pork, fish, and shrimp was naturally Jiang Hai's job. As for cleaning up after returning, mincing and so on, it was all left to these women. After eating lunch, Jiang Hai went to get ingredients. He first went to get pork. Jiang Hai raised pigs in his manor. He didn't know if he still remembered, but he returned to China in the middle of the year last year. In addition to getting a lot of Yangtze River grenadier fish and Chinese bahaba fish, he also got a lot of things from the ground. There was meat donkey from Lu Province, fragrant pig from Tsong River, 9 caddies yellow chicken, sand nest radish, Langshan chicken, and rice. After the beginning of spring this year, rice and radish had been planted, but they weren't ripe yet. Some fragrant pig and chicken had already been eaten. The growth of chickens was very fast. In China, a normal chicken would be ready for slaughter in 1.5 months. At that time, Jiang Hai still remembered that someone on the internet said that his white feather chicken was ready for slaughter in 2 months. What kind of chicken could it be? It must have been injected with hormones or something. At the beginning, Jiang Hai was also a keyboard player. But later, he had a distant relative from the countryside. When he came to the city for business, he ate at his house. When they talked, he mentioned this matter. Then this person said, if it's ready for slaughter in 2 months, then isn't the chicken already old? Later, Jiang Hai checked and found out that generally speaking, meat chickens were sold for 40 to 50 days. The free-range chickens raised in the countryside, the so-called free-range chickens and stupid chickens, would be raised for a long time, but basically, it wouldn't be more than a year. Jiang Hai's chickens were free-range chickens. They were basically raised for fun. If they laid eggs, they would be kept. If they couldn't be collected in time, they would hatch. If they wanted to eat, they would kill one to eat. So, a lot of chickens were killed, but not too many donkeys and pigs. Jiang Hai's target this time was those pigs. Among the pigs that Jiang Hai bought, there were a lot of boars and a lot of sows. But basically, the boars had undergone surgery. They were the kind that could practice the sunflower manual. Only one breeding pig was left. In the ancient Huaxia, very few people ate pork. This was because if the boar didn't undergo surgery, the meat would be smelly and smelly. So, to be honest, the Huaxia started to eat pork seriously in the Ming dynasty. Although it was popularized in the Song dynasty, not many people ate it. Before the Ming dynasty, high officials and nobles had to eat mutton. Beef was an important production tool, and ordinary people ate dog meat. So, in ancient times, there was a saying, hang a sheep's head and sell dog meat. It also meant that the meat was shoddy. After almost a year of raising Jiang Hai's pigs, it wasn't an exaggeration to say that they were all fat and strong. But these pigs were fragrant pigs after all. After a year of raising them, they weren't very big. They weren't like the old sows in the countryside that weighed a few hundred kilograms. When they went there, they were so fierce that even people had to give way sometimes, let alone dogs. Jiang Hai's fragrant pigs weren't big. This kind of pig rarely weighed more than 30 kilograms. But because the food that Jiang Hai ate here was spiritual, while their size wasn't big, their weight had increased a little. They were about 40 kilograms, but the meat was quite good. Jiang Hai drove the 4-wheeled motorcycle to the fragrant pig house. After he arrived outside the fragrant pig house, he directly went in and caught a fragrant pig. He killed it by the river. With Jiang Hai's current physical fitness, what use could a pig have? Because Jiang Hai didn't have the habit of eating slaughtered pork, the blood and internal organs were thrown into the river that he dug. The only thing he ate was the pig liver. Thrown into the river, these things wouldn't go to waste. There were a lot of fish in the river at this time. In addition to the ones that Jiang Hai raised, there were a lot of eels and the like. These things were all fun to play with. After a simple cleaning of the pig, Jiang Hai first pulled it back. Chiya and the others would naturally clean up the pork. Then Jiang Hai rode his 4-wheeled motorcycle to the beach. Diving into the sea, he first caught a lot of abalone and sea cucumbers. These things were also delicious after being cut up and wrapped in dumplings. Then, he got a salmon. He had never eaten salmon dumplings before. He also caught a lot of prawns. Because they were going to be wrapped in the dumplings, 2 big prawns were not good, so he caught some small Arctic red prawns. After everything was done, he returned home. When he got home, the women had almost finished cleaning up the pig. Usually, it was very troublesome to clean up a pig, but because Jiang Hai and the others didn't eat the skin, it was easy to directly peel off the skin. There was no need to roast the pig's hair or anything like that. The pig's head was also thrown away, and no one ate it. The only thing that they ate was the meat. Chapter 782. I'm back. As Jiang Hai walked in carrying 2 baskets of seafood with a smile on his face, everyone who was busy inside the villa raised their heads. When it comes to cleaning up the pigs, it can be said that no one in Jiang Hai's villa had ever cleaned up a pig before. But after Aphrodite and the others entered Jiang Hai's villa, their hearts were set on becoming Jiang Hai's servants. Therefore, when it came to cleaning up the pork, they were still the main ones. As for the commander, it was Ai Xiaoxi. She was the only one who had seen pigs being slaughtered before. When Jiang Hai came back, the pork was almost done and the meat was being shaved. Although Jiang Hai didn't eat fatty meat, making dumplings required some fatty meat in order to roll up the filling. Therefore, Aphrodite and the others still stirred up some fatty meat and made it into minced meat to eat. After seeing Jiang Hai come back, everyone gave a simple response. Then, they took the 2 baskets of food from Jiang Hai's hands and took the initiative to wash them in the kitchen. Jiang Hai's abalones were all wild abalones. Wild abalones were chewy and delicious, but there was one thing that was very troublesome. Because they were wild, and Jiang Hai dug them out to be very big. Therefore, there were a lot of things attached to the abalones, such as some gravel, hair, and other shells, which were very dirty. Therefore, they needed to be brushed directly to get rid of the things that could be removed. Then, they needed to be boiled. Next, they needed to dig out the meat, throw away the green internal organs, and cut the meat into pieces to make minced meat. It was the same for the sea cucumbers. Although they had already spat out their internal organs when Jiang Hai caught them in the sea, the skin still needed to be washed. While they were cleaning up the sea cucumbers and abalones, Jiang Hai and the others didn't stay idle. They took out the prawns and used a toothpick to reach into the back of the prawns' heads and pick out the prawn lines. These prawn lines were full of dirty things. If they weren't picked out, the prawns would have a stinky taste and wouldn't be clean. After everything was done, Jiang Hai and the others also began to divide the work. After about an hour, all the ingredients were prepared. Then, they began to make the minced meat. They put the finely diced sea cucumbers, abalones, cut cabbage, and the pork that had been prepared with a meat blender into a large basin. Then, they put in salt, cooked oil, cooking wine, and other things to marinate. Then, they used the soup made from the leftover pig bones as water. After it was slightly diluted, they were put in the freezer. Then, she divided the prawns into 2 sections and placed 1 section in each dumpling. After she was done, Chia also made the noodles. At this time, the dough that was distributed in the morning had turned into a large lump. Chia was the main hand, and Jiang Hai and the others helped to get the dough out. After the dough was cut, they kneaded it again and put it in the basin. Then, Chia began to teach everyone how to make the dough and make dumplings. Speaking of which, making dumplings was very simple. Spread out the dough, put the filling in the middle, and put half a prawn on the side. This was half done. Then, they had to pinch it. They couldn't pinch the filling out. They also had to control their strength and make the dough stick together. But making the dough was very troublesome. They had to make the dough bulge in the middle and thin on both sides. This was a technical job. After trying for a long time, Chia found that Ai Xiaoxi, Feng Yunqian, Aphrodite, and Hilda had such talent. So she took out the rolling pin and the 5 of them started to make the dough. Jiang Hai and the others made the dumplings at the side. Although the dumplings looked very strange, the atmosphere at the scene was quite good. Everyone was talking and laughing as they made the dumplings. Because they ate beef and seafood all year round, even without Jiang Hai's infusion of spiritual energy, These women's physical fitness had become very good after absorbing the spiritual energy. They didn't feel too tired when making the dumplings. Curtain after curtain of dumplings were made, and each of them stood quietly at the side like little ingots. Looking at the scene in front of him and listening to the laughter, Jiang Hai couldn't help but think of when he was young. That should be 10 years ago? No, it should be 20 years ago. At that time, not only were his parents there, but his grandfather, grandmother, grandmother, and grandfather were also there. Every New Year, when Jiang Hai and the others were 30 years old, they would celebrate the New Year at his grandfather's house. Back then, his parents, his grandfather's family, and his 2 aunts would all gather there. The women would watch the Spring Festival Gala and make dumplings while he, his father, his grandfather, and his brother and sister would wait for the most boring performance of the Spring Festival Gala. Then, they would go downstairs to play with firecrackers. It was the same on the 3rd day of the New Year. They would go to his grandparents' house, but he didn't know when it started. Maybe it was after the older generation passed away, but the New Year didn't feel lively anymore. Other than the closed restaurants everywhere, there was almost no trace of the New Year, especially in recent years. The New Year was the most troublesome time for Jiang Hai. Because there were thousands of lights, but he only had himself. But last year was still okay. After spending the New Year at his mother-in-law's house, there was finally some liveliness. This year, Jiang Hai really wanted to spend the New Year at home because he felt that his family was celebrating the New Year. Hey, what are you thinking about? Are you lost in thought? Just as Jiang Hai was sighing, Qi Jia couldn't help but wipe Jiang Hai's face with her hands and said with a smile. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai didn't say anything. He just picked up his hand and tapped her nose. Then, he chuckled. Home, this is my home, isn't it? Although this family doesn't seem to be too united now, one day, it will be. With a smile, Jiang Hai put more focus on the dumplings in front of him. As Jiang Hai came back to his senses, everyone started to make the dumplings again. Every girl had a different personality. Every person was a living being. Jiang Hai really felt that this wasn't a dream. Everything was real. This was Winthrop, Jiang Hai's soaring dragon manor. After a while, the dumplings were almost done. Unknowingly, it was already past 4 in the afternoon. Chia, who had been busy for a long time and was hungry, ordered everyone to steam the dumplings and boil the dumplings. Everyone was busy. At 5 o'clock, everything was ready. With Jiang Hai's order, everyone who had already prepared the condiments stretched out their chopsticks and picked up the dumplings in front of them. Jiang Hai didn't want to be outdone. He directly picked up a piece. He didn't dip the first dumpling into the condiments. Instead, he took a bite. However, this bite almost didn't burn him because there was soup in the filling. The soup was already frozen, so he didn't notice it when he was making the dumpling. However, after it was cooked, the filling of the dumpling was still clumped together with some soup. When he bit down, the hot soup rushed out. Although it was very hot, Jiang Hai couldn't bear to spit it out. This soup was really too fresh and delicious. The taste of meat, bones, abalone, sea cucumber, prawns, and cabbage were perfectly blended together in this soup. When he bit down, the feeling of the soup and filling was really great. After taking a few deep breaths, Jiang Hai chewed half of the dumpling. Then, he couldn't wait to eat the remaining half. Jiang Hai wasn't the only gluttonous person who was scalded like Jiang Hai. For a while, the sound of cold air was heard on the dining table. Although it was hot, no one spat out the dumplings in their mouths. First, it was because of the delicious taste. Second, it was because of the atmosphere. Usually, the people in Jiang Hai's manor weren't as harmonious as today. After today, Jiang Hai felt that the estrangement between everyone had decreased a lot. Next time, when Valentina and the others come back, let's also make dumplings to eat. Let's do it together. Looking at the lively atmosphere in front of her, Azalina came over and whispered. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai also nodded with a smile. That's right. While Jiang Hai and the others were eating happily here, another group of people was not so happy. At this time, on the other side of the United States, Massachusetts was the northeast corner of the United States, and the line of sight was now turned to the southwest corner. California, or California for short, in Hua-Xia, was second only to New York. In fact, this was the case. All the cities in the world were added together. New York was the first in the world, and Los Angeles was the second in the world. But now, the goal of the line of sight was not Los Angeles, but Santa Clara County. It should be said that this name was still a little unfamiliar to everyone, but when it came to another name, everyone would probably say, "Oh, so it's here." Silicon Valley. The headquarters of the United States, where high-tech enterprises gathered. At this time, on the streets of Santa Clara County, a middle-aged man was walking forward with a bottle of wine in his hand. From time to time, he would take a sip from his mouth. The decadence on this middle-aged man's face and the smell of alcohol on his body were not unfamiliar to the people in this area. Entrepreneurship distribution centers were naturally unemployment distribution centers. When some people succeeded, there would be more people who failed. So in New York, in Silicon Valley, such a figure was really normal. At this time, this person was like this, swaying while cursing someone. He came to a community with good greenery, then walked into a small villa. After swaying, he took out the key to open the door and walked into his bedroom. But just as he turned on the light, his pupils instantly dilated because the room that should have been empty was full of people at this time. Looking at these people, a stream of cold sweat slowly flowed down from his forehead. "Who are you? What are you doing in my house?" While leaning against the wall, the man asked, and at the same time, his hand reached for the door handle. At this time, his original intoxicated state was gone. It seemed that fright was always a good way to sober up. "We are your friends, Marvin." Mariang Smith. Hearing his words, a middle-aged man in a mountaineering suit walked out with a smile. "You're tuning in to the Romantic Tales YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.